Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Lauren Malt. While at university, Karen met Nigel Malt, a man with ambitious career goals. Their relationship started off well and seemed promising for starting a family. Although Karen's mother was concerned about Nigel's rude behavior, she chose to ignore this advice. They later married and had a daughter, Lauren Malt, who was born on April 8, 2002. Initially, Karen and Nigel's life together appeared happy, and they seemed to have a bright future ahead of them. However, over time, Nigel began to manipulate Karen. He used typical abuser tactics, suppressing her emotions with lies and appealing to her feelings of pity, which made her dependent on him. She was financially dependent on her husband and was unable to continue her studies due to pregnancy, making it difficult for her to find a job later on. Nigel had a long history of addiction to alcohol and prohibited substances. By this time, he was unable to function without these substances, which led to serious consequences for his life and family. Nigel had been a kind person before, but as his addiction worsened, his personality changed dramatically. He became aggressive and cruel toward Karen. Nigel's violent outbursts increased, and he began to take his anger out on Karen, eventually leading to physical abuse. Things worsened when their daughter, Lauren, observed the abuse. Despite this, Karen fought hard to save the relationship. By the time she could no longer take it, they had 4 children together. The thought of divorce was terrifying, especially with a long legal battle ahead. Their joint assets were minimal, and the prospect of being a single mother to 4 children worried Karen. She was particularly stressed about child support and custody, fearing that her husband Nigel might try to gain custody of the children just to hurt her. At this time, everyone was tired of Nigel's irresponsible behavior. He used to earn money and support his family, but now he had started to waste almost all of his income on alcohol and prohibited substances. Karen was very concerned about the impact this had on their children, who were growing up in fear. Their father drank every day and often abused their mother in front of them. This situation could not go on forever, but Karen was patient for a long time. Despite her family and friends urging her to leave him, she stayed for the sake of her children. It became clear that Nigel could not change. Karen decided to talk to Nigel about getting a divorce, which led to another angry outburst from him. He refused to pay alimony, making his stance clear to her. However, she and the children no longer wanted to live with someone so dangerous. The conversation ended in another conflict, filled with threats, which only strengthened Karen's resolve to leave her unfit husband as soon as possible. In March 2021, Karen reported Nigel's violent behavior to the police after a violent fight broke out while he was drunk. Karen later withdrew her testimony to spare him trouble, hoping that he would cooperate and consider a peaceful divorce. However, his failure to take responsibility made the situation worse. In April, Karen experienced an even more severe beating, which left her terrified for her life and concerned for her children. Realizing she needed to take action to end the abuse, she contacted the police again to report the domestic violence. Taking advantage of the moment Nigel was taken to the police station, she decided to escape with her children to her mother's house. However, he posted bail and was released while awaiting further legal action. He was placed under house arrest and tried to manipulate her emotions by claiming he would end his life. But this no longer affected Karen. She was determined to act strongly and see things through to the end. To show Nigel that she was serious, she attempted to obtain a restraining order, but unfortunately, this effort failed. During this time, financial troubles worsened, leading Nigel to drink more heavily and become increasingly aggressive, cruel. He could not control his anger, treating not only his wife poorly, but also Lauren and their sons. Finally, Nigel was found guilty of domestic violence and received a suspended sentence. He was prohibited from contacting Karen and the children. During this time, he lost everything. Karen left him and refused to listen to any excuses or promises. He also lost touch with his children, who were no longer interested in seeing him because of his unpredictable and cruel behavior. Alcohol, which he had developed a daily habit of consuming, was banned, and he was unable to control his addiction. It appeared he was using alcohol as a way to cope with the hope of reconciling with his wife. However, Karen was firm in her decision and demanded a divorce. All of this has left Nigel feeling demotivated. Despite his promises to stop using prohibited substances, his condition worsened. He claimed this was due to his need to cope with his problems. The issue of alimony needed to be addressed, as it was nearly impossible for Karen to support 4 children alone. Karen found a job as a salesperson, but her income was insufficient. To help, their daughter Lauren took on several part-time jobs. Meanwhile, Karen's lawyer reassured her that she didn't need to worry about custody. Nigel was a severe alcoholic, and due to allegations of violence, he could be completely barred from seeing the children. At this time, Lauren's relationship with her father, Nigel, was strained, so she only wanted to communicate with her mother. During this time, Karen and her children lived in her grandmother's house in a small village called West Winch in Norfolk County, UK. Lauren turned 19 during this time and was dating a guy named Arthur. On Sunday, January 23, 2022, Arthur took Lauren to work at the store where she was employed as a salesperson. Throughout the day, Nigel called his daughter, Lauren, multiple times. It was unclear what he wanted, but she suspected he was in an unstable state. To avoid distractions at work, she chose not to engage in any conversations. After a long and tiring shift, Lauren returned home, hoping to unwind with her boyfriend before starting her next shift the following day. She was working hard, including overtime, to save money for her education. That evening, Nigel began calling again. It was clear he was not sober. Lauren decided to ignore his calls, hoping he would calm down. However, he was relentless, calling 19 times between 6:25 p.m. and 6:52 p.m. Despite the constant ringing, Lauren remained silent. Unfortunately, ignoring Nigel was no longer an option. He lived just 10 minutes away, making it easy for him to show up unannounced. At around 7:01 p.m., Nigel called Lauren, and she answered out of fear that not responding would escalate things further. Their conversation was brief and quickly turned hostile, filled with insults and threats. Lauren tried to calm her father, but her efforts only seemed to infuriate him more. According to Arthur, Nigel arrived at Lauren's house at 7:21 p.m. while Karen was at work. He was clearly drunk and acted aggressively. Lauren stepped outside, attempting to de-escalate the situation, but he responded with insults and tried to provoke a fight. He swung the crowbar and nearly hit her several times. After several attempts to grab her, he threatened to attack Arthur, who had been with her. Eventually, Lauren prompted Nigel to leave, expressing her desire to avoid further communication with him in that state. Lauren attempted to get Nigel into the car to make him leave, but unexpectedly, he began screaming again. He jumped into his car, and just as Lauren was behind it, he suddenly reversed and ran over his own daughter. He paused for a few seconds, staring at her through the windshield. She was seriously injured, bleeding and screaming for help, but he did nothing. He didn't even get out of the car or call for an ambulance. Instead, he pressed the gas pedal and ran over Lauren a second time. It all happened so fast that Arthur couldn't react in time to assist her. The commotion drew the attention of neighbors, who called the police. One man rushed into the street, trying to stop Nigel, the crazed driver. Nigel saw Lauren lying on the ground, moaning in pain with serious injuries, but she was still alive. The neighbor realized that calling an ambulance was urgent, as Lauren had sustained injuries that would prevent her from being moved. However, Nigel was indifferent and insisted that everything was fine, claiming Lauren only had a few scratches. He pushed away the neighbor and Arthur, who were shouting at him to stop and call for help. Instead of calling emergency services, Nigel picked up Lauren and placed her in the passenger seat of his car. As he did this, Lauren moaned in pain, especially when Nigel tried to push her into the car. She was unable to sit up straight or maintain her balance due to her injuries, which likely included fractures. Nigel didn't even buckle her seatbelt, causing her to roll onto the floor in front of the passenger seat. While driving, he called his ex-wife, Karen, and began to tell a confusing story about an incident in which he accidentally injured Lauren. He was drunk, and his explanation was muddled. Karen didn't fully understand what was happening, but decided to wait for Nigel to arrive at her workplace. Nigel insists that Lauren is not seriously injured and wants to inform Karen so that Karen can take her to the hospital. He admitted that he couldn't do it himself because he had been drinking and was afraid of losing his driver's license. He drove directly to the parking lot in front of the store where Karen worked. Upon seeing Lauren's condition, Karen realized that Nigel had downplayed the severity of the situation. Lauren was in critical condition, and Karen struggled to lift her from the floor into a seat. During this time, Nigel merely watched in silence. Lauren showed no response. It appeared she could lose consciousness from the pain. Eventually, Karen called for an ambulance. Lauren was taken to the hospital, where doctors quickly realized her injuries were severe and could only be treated at a specialized medical center. They did everything possible to save her life. Unfortunately, a few minutes after she was on the operating table, her heart stopped beating. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene where Lauren was stabbed. There, they met Arthur and the neighbors, who witnessed the horrific incident. Bloody tire marks were visible on the driveway, evidence left by Nigel. Unlike many other crimes, there was enough evidence to bring immediate charges. The medical examiner evaluated the injuries of Lauren, who was the victim of a double car crash. She suffered a broken back, which caused her to lose her balance and fall onto the car floor. Her rib cage was severely damaged, multiple ribs were broken, her lungs were torn, and she experienced significant internal bleeding. The traumatic injuries to her chest and abdomen were fatal, as many of her internal organs were crushed or harmed by bone fragments. It was clear that she had been run over by a car, and she might have survived the first collision. After the second collision, she might have had a chance of survival if she had not been pushed into the car by Nigel and fallen, and if paramedics had been called immediately. Unfortunately, her fall to the floor of the car made her condition worse, and the delay ultimately claimed her life. Nigel Malt was quickly apprehended. It was discovered that he was highly intoxicated, with a blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit for driving. Karen believed his aggressive behavior was solely due to alcohol or prohibited substance use. After his arrest, Nigel refused to cooperate with authorities. Nigel provided basic details about his name and address to the police, but refused to discuss the incident. During the preliminary hearing, he denied any wrongdoing, despite clear evidence against him. He explained that he went to see Lauren that evening after she didn't answer his calls, and then spoke to him rudely. He tried to talk to her, but she was unresponsive because he was leaving and planned to talk later. As he backed his car out, he felt a slight thump, but assumed he had hit a box or a rock that he hadn't seen in the rearview mirror. He had no clue that he had run over his own daughter. When he backed up to check what he had hit, he accidentally ran over her again. This is clearly a dishonest excuse from a coward who dares not admit his guilt. The detectives observed how unemotional he was when discussing his daughter's death, and it seemed to have no effect on him. In conversations about his family, he often spoke of Karen and Lauren with disdain. This situation was completely baffling. Nigel's wife Karen was a good woman devoted to her family. Lauren grew up to be just like her mother, a decent person. Despite the difficult home life caused by Nigel, she avoided alcohol and other harmful substances. Instead, she focused on her education, career, and improving her life. The neighbor and Lauren's boyfriend Arthur contradicted Nigel's assertion that the incident was accidental. They claimed that after Nigel ran over her while reversing, he paused for a few seconds, shining his headlights on her. Nigel could not have missed her at that moment. Then, he intentionally ran over her a second time. This could not have been an accident. Even if he didn't see her the first time, she was clearly in his line of sight the second time. The neighbor claimed that there was a conflict between Nigel and Lauren that evening. He described Nigel as aggressive and unkind. Even when Nigel hit Lauren with his car, he showed anger on his face and did not stop. The neighbor believed that the violence started because Lauren was simply asking him to leave. The police have obtained new evidence. While the neighbor attempted to talk to Nigel, several local residents recorded the incident with their cameras and phones from their windows. This footage was later presented in court. It clearly showed Nigel intentionally running over Lauren, and the prosecutor's office argued that the initial incident was also not an accident. Even the defense lawyer acknowledged that what happened could hardly be seen as a mere coincidence. The defense attorney focused on arguing that the murder was unintentional, but this argument lacked credibility. However, the bloody tire tracks and Nigel's tire tracks were a perfect match. Given the undeniable evidence, Nigel Malt was found guilty. In September 2022, a hearing was held where the sentence was announced. Nigel Malt was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years before he could apply for parole. The court noted that Karen's claims of domestic violence were considered when determining the sentence. Karen's family made it clear that they would remain involved. Karen stated in a media interview that she would attend every parole hearing to ensure that Nigel did not get released. At the sentencing hearing, Nigel relied on crutches for support throughout the proceedings. He maintained his innocence, claiming the incident was an accident. Many believed he was trying to gain sympathy from the court by portraying himself as a victim, a tactic he often used with Karen. Others saw this as just punishment for a man who had killed a child. Karen had decided to proceed with the divorce, feeling ashamed to be associated with a man who killed his own daughter in a drunken rage. He had used his car as a weapon, running over her twice and leaving her no chance of survival. Given these circumstances, Karen felt the sentence was too lenient and believed Nigel should never be released. Karen argued that he was a dangerous and cruel man who had completely lost control due to excessive drinking and the use of prohibited substances. She warned that if he were released, he would continue to kill. It was only a matter of time. Notably, Nigel's sons have repeatedly stated that they would only feel safe if their father remained in prison for life. The case has created great public outrage, leading to much discussion about protecting children and spouses from domestic abusers. Activists are calling for harsher penalties for individuals like Nigel, including life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, no substantial changes have been made so far. In a seemingly quiet house, fear permeated the air. A family was trapped in a room, holding their breath and hoping that the locked door would protect them. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The lock broke, someone collapsed, and footsteps echoed in the hallway. This was not just a random burglary, it was a premeditated act. When the police arrived in the morning, they discovered a perplexing crime scene. A family of 4 and their 3 dogs were found shot dead in their home. It appeared to be a robbery, yet nothing had been taken. All clues pointed toward one individual, but the real question remained: who was truly in control? As detectives looked for answers, they realized the situation involved far more than just love, jealousy, or revenge. Someone had orchestrated everything. When the truth finally emerged, it was more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born around 1993 in an environment where crime and violence were common. As a child, he displayed a reckless, rebellious attitude. He had little interest in school, often fighting with classmates and neglecting his studies. His first run-in with the law occurred during his teenage years when he was caught participating in a robbery. Due to his age, he faced minimal consequences. Nathaniel soon discovered that a life of crime offered not only excitement but also financial rewards. His criminal activities escalated, and by 2016, he was imprisoned for assault. A year later, he was arrested again for driving under the influence. Nathaniel had a particular fascination with firearms. He built a collection of guns. Although the courts prohibited him from owning firearms, he disregarded this ban, turned to the black market to acquire weapons illegally. Despite his criminal history, Nathaniel attempted to pose as a legitimate businessman by starting a private security company, even though it was not properly licensed. Legally, he was not allowed to carry a weapon, yet he boasted about his supposed authority on social media, posting pictures of himself in tactical gear and heavily armed. On the other side of the story is Ermelinda Palomo, born on 1973. By the time she met Nathaniel, she was a fiercely independent woman, a mother of 5, and already a grandmother. Although she had a stable upbringing, her personal life was marked by challenges. She had married young, but the marriage ended, leaving her to raise her children on her own. Determined to support them, she held multiple jobs while managing her responsibilities as both a mother and grandmother. She was strict with her family, which earned her respect but sometimes led to resentment. When she met Nathaniel, those around her found it hard to understand their connection. He was 20 years younger, had a tumultuous past, and represented the chaos she had always tried to avoid. Some say they met through mutual friends, but regardless of the circumstances, their relationship moved quickly. Initially, Ermelinda brushed Nathaniel off, but his confidence, persistence, and reckless charm drew her in. For Nathaniel, Ermelinda represented stability and a sense of security he had never experienced. For her, it was a new adventure, an opportunity to feel in control over someone with a free lifestyle. Their relationship was unconventional, with an attraction rooted in their differences. Soon, they moved in together, sharing a crowded home with Ermelinda's children and grandchildren, but their living situation was anything but harmonious. Nathaniel's obsession with weapons remained strong over the years. Despite legal restrictions, he continued to buy and show off firearms, making secret deals and finding loopholes to justify his actions. For him, guns were not just a collection, they were a part of who he was. He always carried a weapon, even inside the house, frequently took apart and cleaned his firearms on the kitchen table. At first, Ermelinda paid little attention to this behavior. She was more focused on the money he made than the legality of his actions. However, as time passed, she began to realize that Nathaniel's interests went beyond financial gain. He was unpredictable and could become angry over minor issues, such as a misplaced word or an unfriendly glance. His temper could shift from intense rage to unnerving calm in an instant. Cristiana Espinoza, one of Ermelinda's daughters, was the first to express concern. Unlike others who ignored the warning signs, she recognized Nathaniel for who he really was, a dangerous man. She noticed how he talked about violence, carried himself with arrogance, and never tolerated being contradicted. But what scared her the most was how quickly he could lose control. By 2021, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had been living together for 6 years. On the surface, their relationship appeared stable, but its foundation had deteriorated long ago. Nathaniel had always been unfaithful, and his affairs had become routine. He used social media to meet new women, engaged in secretive conversations, and carefully deleted his messages. Often, he would leave late at night, providing vague excuses about work or meetings. Ermelinda would wake up in the middle of the night to find him gone. He would return by dawn without any explanation. Nathaniel never feared being caught. He thought Ermelinda either wouldn't discover his infidelities or wouldn't confront him if she did. He mistakenly believed he had all the control, not recognizing Ermelinda's true strength. At first, Ermelinda chose to overlook the warning signs, but soon the evidence became too clear to ignore. His late nights, secretive messages, and newfound obsession with his appearance all indicated something troubling. Her fears were confirmed when she saw a suspicious message pop up on his phone, leaving no room for doubt. Rather than confronting him right away, Ermelinda decided to gather evidence. If Nathaniel thought he was safe from consequences, he was about to find out otherwise. She began monitoring him closely, observing his movements, noting his habits, and even checking his messages when he wasn't paying attention. Before long, she could tell when he was lying, when he was trying to cover his tracks, and when he was sneaking off for yet another secret meeting. With each new revelation, her anger grew stronger. She realized she had two options: to leave him behind and erase him from her life, or to make him regret every decision that led to this moment. The more she considered it, the clearer her resolve became. She refused to be just another woman he discarded. If she wanted to make him feel pain, she had to be strategic. Instead of erupting into an argument, she decided on a different approach. She would make him feel cornered. She planned to turn his own life against him. Ermelinda's plan began with deception. She created fake social media accounts, selecting photos and inventing identities to construct believable personas. She studied online scams to learn how to manipulate and deceive effectively. This included understanding threats, the structure of underground networks, psychological tactics. Her most powerful tool was information. She figured out how to track locations, access hidden data, and manipulate the digital landscape in ways Nathaniel would not anticipate. Then, she initiated her scheme. Her first contact with Nathaniel came through a woman who seemed genuinely interested in him. As expected, he fell for it and responded eagerly, unaware that he was entering Ermelinda's trap. Initially, their conversations appeared harmless, consisting of light flirtation. However, she began to drop hints about his life that she shouldn't have known, leading him to believe someone was monitoring him. The tipping point came when she sent him a message with his real-time location. This left Nathaniel unsettled. Ermelinda could see the change in his demeanor as he started looking over his shoulder and checking his surroundings. But her tactics were far from over. The next phase of deception brought in new individuals. Nathaniel began receiving messages from various people. Some were threatening, while others falsely claimed to offer him protection. They contacted him through different platforms and phone numbers, without any clear pattern. Some messages demanded money, while others warned him to avoid certain locations. A few suggested that he was already involved in something much larger than himself. This confusion was intentional. His behavior changed almost overnight. He became restless and anxious, avoided answering unknown calls, constantly checked his surroundings, and even asked Ermelinda to drive him around to ensure he wasn't being followed. He changed his passwords and deleted messages, trying to rid himself of the unseen threat. However, the more he attempted to escape, the more entangled he became in Ermelinda's scheme. She observed with satisfaction as paranoia consumed him. Unbeknownst to him, the real danger was lurking right under his roof. In May 2023, a new woman entered Nathaniel's life, Zoraida Bartolome, one of his co-workers. Zoraida was already entangled in her own complicated situation. She was married with 2 children but was unhappy at home. She had cheated in the past and didn't feel guilty about it, believing that her own happiness was more important than being loyal. For Nathaniel, Zoraida represented an exciting escape from his troubled relationship with Ermelinda. Their connection began with stolen glances and quiet conversations, quickly escalating into something they both found hard to abandon. Ermelinda had been observing Nathaniel closely and noticed a shift in his behavior. At first, she assumed Zoraida was just another fleeting romance, but then she discovered messages that revealed deeper feelings. Nathaniel was telling Zoraida that he loved her and wanted a future together. She reciprocated those feelings, and they fantasized about leaving everything behind to start anew. As Ermelinda read their exchanges, she felt a mix of pain and humiliation. Despite her efforts to protect their relationship, Nathaniel was pursuing another woman. Now, she felt compelled to take drastic action against him. She escalated the psychological manipulation, introducing even more frightening figures into Nathaniel's life. He was no longer just being observed, he felt as if he was being hunted. Nathaniel had endured too much to feel fear anymore. He had survived the worst, or so he thought. Now, all that mattered to him was Zoraida. Leaving her was not an option. For the first time, he wasn't merely hiding an affair, he was fighting for it. Ermelinda noticed this change in him. If she couldn't break Nathaniel directly, she would aim to destroy Zoraida instead. Her first tactic was to undermine Zoraida's stability. Using her network of fake accounts, she contacted Zoraida's husband, Alberto Rolón. Initially, she planted vague doubts through anonymous messages that suggested betrayal. She even included photos of Zoraida and Nathaniel together, ensuring they were clear enough to raise suspicion. However, Alberto was not easily swayed. He dismissed the warnings, unwilling to accept that his wife could deceive him so openly. That's when Ermelinda intensified her approach. The subsequent messages were not just about infidelity, they included threats. Unsigned letters arrived at their home with clear implications. If Alberto did not take action, his family would be in danger. Alberto began to observe Zoraida more intently. The tension in their home was exactly as Ermelinda had intended. However, Nathaniel was still unwilling to let go. Even as paranoia invaded his life, he held on to Zoraida as if she were his last hope. Ermelinda manipulated his perceptions, convincing him that Zoraida was providing information to the people spying on him. She crafted a story so believable that even Nathaniel began to doubt his own reality. Using fake accounts, she sent messages from imaginary informants, all suggesting the same idea. Zoraida wasn't just a woman Nathaniel had fallen for, she was working against him and was the source of the ongoing threats. Nathaniel's paranoia took over him completely. He confronted Ermelinda about his suspicions, and she played along convincingly. Initially, she seemed unsure, but then she reluctantly confessed that she had also received warnings about Zoraida. Nathaniel realized he could no longer dismiss these concerns. He had to take action to ensure his survival. Next, Ermelinda put him to the ultimate test of loyalty. She made him believe that his supposed enemies were closely monitoring him and required evidence that he hadn't betrayed them. The only way he could prove his loyalty was by making a crucial decision himself: kill Zoraida. By the time Nathaniel reached his decision, he felt no hesitation. There was no fear or regret, just a cold, determined focus on what needed to be done. He started planning immediately, treating the situation like a mission. Nathaniel studied Zoraida's routines, tracked her schedule, and identified when she was most vulnerable. He noted when Alberto was home, when the children were asleep, and when it would be easiest to enter the house. He mapped out potential escape routes, looking for surveillance cameras and memorizing the neighborhood layout. Simultaneously, he prepared his supplies. He already had a stockpile of weapons but gathered additional tools, including clothing to help him blend into the night, gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, tape, and a flashlight. Together with Ermelinda, he chose items carefully, ensuring no one would suspect anything. Although Ermelinda remained in the background and was not directly involved, she always provided guidance to keep him on track. By the time everything was ready, Nathaniel had stopped considering the consequences. The night came. Ermelinda drove towards Zoraida's house with an unsettling calmness, acting as if it were just another evening. She even asked Nathaniel why he needed to go there, though she already knew the reason. He didn't answer. He no longer cared about her opinion, only the task ahead mattered. When they arrived at the house, Ermelinda remained in the car while Nathaniel got out. As he expected, the front door was locked. He quietly moved around to the side of the house, found a window, and broke the glass. The sound startled Alberto awake. He sat up, listened intently, and then cautiously approached the noise. By that time, Nathaniel was already inside. As soon as Alberto rounded the corner, Nathaniel fired his gun, but his shot went wide. Realizing this was more than just a break-in, Alberto turned and ran toward the hallway, desperate to reach his family's room before the intruder. However, Nathaniel was quicker. Gunshots rang out through the house. Alberto fell to the ground before he could reach the door. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the next gunshot broke the stillness, sending Zoraida into a panic. Without thinking, she rushed to the bedroom, pulling her children along, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind her. She knew Nathaniel was inside and was unsure how many others he was with, but her priority was to keep her family safe. Moments later, Nathaniel slammed his shoulder against the door, trying to force it open, but it held strong. Frustrated, he stepped back, aimed his gun, and shot at the lock. The bullet pierced through the wood. Zoraida gasped as the impact hit her. She stiffened and then collapsed. The doors swung open, the children huddled together, their eyes filled with fear. The neighbors only heard a few brief, muffled gunshots. It all happened within minutes. Nathaniel looked around at the scene, took a deep breath to calm himself, and then began to methodically rearrange things. He flipped over furniture, opened drawers, and scattered valuable items on the floor to make it appear as though a robbery had taken place. Once he finished, he stepped over the bodies and exited into the night. Ermelinda was waiting for him in the car. She didn't need to ask how it went, her expression said it all. They drove away silently, leaving the chaos behind. The sounds had awakened the neighborhood, and after a few minutes, someone finally summoned the courage to call 911. Soon after, sirens filled the street. Officers arrived to find shattered glass, a broken door, and clear signs of a break-in. Inside, the bodies revealed a much darker story than just a failed robbery. Nathaniel had made serious mistakes, careless ones. Nothing of value had been stolen. The disarray of his possessions seemed like a feeble attempt to mislead. It was evident that this incident wasn't simply about theft, it was premeditated and targeted. By morning, detectives were connecting the crime to Nathaniel Huey, the only person with a motive. At Zoraida's workplace, everyone knew about their affair. It hadn't been a secret. As detectives continued to investigate, things looked increasingly bad for Nathaniel. His history was filled with crimes, assaults, suspicious dealings, and a collection of weapons. As the police gathered evidence, Ermelinda maintained her facade. She kept messaging Nathaniel, using the false identity she had created. She assured him that everything was under control, claiming the mafia was protecting him and that as long as he followed their instructions, he'd be safe. He trusted her, but the investigation was progressing more quickly than Ermelinda anticipated. They scrutinized Nathaniel's recent activities, analyzing every call, email, and text message. One thing stood out: in recent months, he had received a flood of anonymous threats, warnings of danger, and claims that he was being hunted. However, all those messages had originated from newly created accounts. If this were truly a mafia operation, why was the evidence focusing solely on Nathaniel? The more the detectives uncovered, the clearer it became that the threats were staged, as if someone had been fabricating a false narrative specifically for him. This was the turning point in the investigation. Nathaniel was in a downward spiral. He sensed that the police were closing in on him and started noticing unmarked cars tailing him, along with strangers watching him too closely. He convinced himself that the mafia was still after him, waiting for him to make a mistake. In his desperation, he reached out to the only person he believed he could trust, his mother. He begged her for help, claiming he was being falsely accused of something terrible and needed to go into hiding. However, she refused to help him. With nowhere else to turn, Nathaniel managed to stay hidden for a few days, but eventually, security cameras captured him in a grocery store. A manhunt ensued, with patrol cars flooding the area, but by the time the officers arrived, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had already made it onto the highway. The chase began. Police followed with sirens blaring for miles, but Nathaniel had no plans to stop. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, accelerating and weaving through traffic in a frantic attempt to flee. Ermelinda had carefully planned every detail leading up to this moment, and now she was watching her plan unfold perfectly. Ahead of them, traffic became congested. Nathaniel attempted to navigate around a truck, but he lost his grip, causing the tire to screech against the road. The car spun out of control, crashing into the guardrail and flipping multiple times before coming to a sudden stop. Officers surrounded the wreck, weapons drawn. Nathaniel slumped in the driver's seat, a gun in his hand, while Ermelinda sat motionless beside him. In those final moments, he had turned the gun on her and then himself. Investigators sifted through the wreckage, trying to understand what had transpired inside the car. Did he realize what was happening? The investigation didn't stop there. Detectives focused on Ermelinda's devices. Hidden within her files were hundreds of messages, chat logs, and notes detailing her manipulation of Nathaniel, dozens of fake accounts that she had carefully created and controlled. She had constructed this elaborate scheme. She understood how to break a person's will and instill fear so deeply that they would do anything to escape it. And it had worked. Nathaniel had never been in danger. There was no mafia. The true enemy had been sitting right beside him all along. In the end, the case was closed, but one question lingered. Did Nathaniel understand the situation before he took action? Ermelinda's calculated plan, fueled by wounded pride and a desire for revenge, transformed Nathaniel from an unfaithful partner into a paranoid pawn who unwittingly executed her deadly scheme. The Romeoville murders, disguised as a robbery, revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions and hidden motives. As the investigation uncovered Ermelinda's intricate web of lies, it left one lingering question unanswered. Did Nathaniel ever glimpse the truth behind his actions, or did he remain trapped in her illusions until the end? Alicia Bromfield was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois, to James and Sherry Anisic. She has 4 siblings, an older sister named Brianna and 3 older brothers named Luke, Chase, and Colton. Since childhood, Alicia has been known for her high energy and cheerful personality. Her family is very important to her, especially her mother and grandmother, who have always provided her with support and comfort. The loss of her grandmother was a profound blow to Alicia, leaving a lasting impact on her life. Even though she has experienced pain, she has never lost her joy for life or her optimism. She was an energetic child, always smiling and ready for new adventures. At school, Alicia was active and engaged, and she enjoyed spending time in nature. She graduated from Joliet Catholic Academy in 2008 and later pursued studies in criminal justice and forensic psychology at Western Illinois University. After Alicia's parents divorced when she was young, her relationship with her mother deepened. She primarily lived with her mother, and when her mother remarried, she felt genuinely happy, embracing the idea of a big, loving family, something she had always dreamed of creating for herself in the future. Becoming a mother was one of Alicia's most important aspirations, as she felt that motherhood was a significant part of her purpose. At 16, Alicia started working at Grand Flower Growers, where she made beautiful floral arrangements sold at a nearby Home Depot. She had a natural talent for design and loved seeing her creativity bring joy to others. This job is also ideal for a student like her, flexible, stable, and paid right away. However, there was a troubling aspect to her experience. Her supervisor, 35-year-old Brian Cooper, soon became inappropriately interested in her. What began as a work-related conversation gradually became more personal. Brian started pushing for a romantic relationship, which Alicia consistently refused. He was nearly twice her age, and his behavior was not only inappropriate but also unsettling. This situation was difficult for Alicia to handle. Brian was her boss, and she had to interact with him almost every day. She couldn't quit because she needed the job to support her college expenses. Alicia tried to remain professional and not encourage Brian to pursue her. However, he ignored her boundaries and continued to pursue her. She reported his behavior to the company multiple times, stating that he yelled at her when she rejected his advances, called her derogatory names, and spread negative gossip about her. He misused his authority by denying her breaks and assigning her extra hours to punish her for not reciprocating his feelings. Additionally, he spread rumors among colleagues, falsely claiming that she was his girlfriend. Despite these challenges, Alicia remained resilient. She continued to juggle school, her personal life, and a toxic work atmosphere for 5 long years. By the age of 21, while still working at Grand Flower Growers and still facing Brian's disturbing behavior, Alicia unexpectedly discovered she was pregnant. The father was a fellow university student, not Brian, but he chose to be uninvolved in the child's life. Although Alicia felt heartbroken by his absence, she was thrilled about becoming a mother and more determined than ever to create a wonderful life for her baby. Alicia couldn't quit her job because she needed to save money for herself and her child while finishing her studies. She was delighted to find out that she was pregnant with a baby girl, whom she named Ava Lucille, expressing her love for her daughter. However, she is facing trouble with her boss, Brian Cooper. Despite learning about her pregnancy, Brian became more controlling instead of being supportive. He coerced her into working overtime, altered her work schedule without prior notice, and threatened to terminate her employment if she missed even a single day to see a doctor. Although Alicia tried to maintain a professional environment, Brian continued to harass her. He made her run personal errands, including walking his dog, and threatened her job if she refused. Alicia felt trapped. She was about to become a mother, and every dollar counted. Quitting so close to her due date wasn't feasible. Unfortunately, when she complained to upper management, nothing improved. The only action taken was asking Brian to leave early and attend anger management classes, but he never attended those sessions. As the weeks went by, Alicia became increasingly worn out, both physically and emotionally. She decided to confide in her mother, Sherry, hoping that someone would finally listen and offer support. Alicia felt she had done everything right. She had filed complaints, stood firm, and remained resilient. Yet, no one seemed to hold Brian accountable for his actions. In August 2012, Brian confronted Alicia with a new request. He wanted her to attend his sister's wedding with him. Alicia immediately refused, as the thought of spending a weekend with the man who had made her life so difficult was unbearable. However, Brian was persistent and threatened her job if she didn't comply. Alicia felt trapped. If she said no, she risked losing her job at a time when finding new work could be very challenging due to her pregnancy. Unsure of what to do, she shared the invitation with her mother. Sherry advised her to quit the job altogether, but Brian reassured them that his request was simply a friendly gesture. He promised that the entire wedding party would be in the same hotel and that he would behave appropriately. This slightly eased Alicia's anxiety, leading her to reluctantly agree to attend while establishing clear boundaries. She made it clear that this was not a date. She was going as a friend and believed that there would be people around to support her if she felt unsafe. On August 18th, Alicia and Brian traveled to Wisconsin, planning to stay at Sand Bay Beach Resort. Alicia believed that Brian's family would be there and that she wouldn't be alone. However, this assumption changed as soon as they arrived. She found out that she and Brian were at a different resort than the other guests. In fact, they were entirely alone, no family or wedding party, just the two of them. This understandably made Alicia feel angry and anxious. She immediately texted her mom, saying they had an argument and were heading home. Her mother, Sherry, found this strange, since Brian was supposed to walk his older sister down the aisle, so they couldn't go out. Not long after, Alicia sent another text message to her mother, informing her that they had reconciled and decided to stay. In retrospect, the message seemed suspicious, yet Alicia had genuinely written it. Later that day, she even attended the wedding with Brian. There's a photo of them smiling for the camera, but what no one at the wedding could see was the underlying truth. Brian was once again pressuring Alicia to act like they were a couple. Alicia had made her point many times, but Brian continued to cross the line. With no one around to intervene, Alicia reached her breaking point. She was tired of the games, manipulation, and lies. All she wanted was to move on, focus on her baby, and leave Brian and this nightmare behind for good. Alicia made it clear that once the wedding weekend was over and they returned to Illinois, she would cut all ties with Brian. She no longer wanted awkward friendships or professional courtesies. She wanted to completely sever ties with him. And who could blame her? After years of unwanted attention and pressure from Brian, Alicia had finally had enough. However, she found herself stranded miles from home in Wisconsin without her own car. Since Brian had driven them there, she had no option but to rely on him to get back home. When Alicia told Brian that she didn't want to continue the relationship, Brian underwent a change internally. He didn't react immediately, but his silence revealed his mood. He felt angry and rejected. The situation worsened when he started drinking, further deteriorating his mood. After the wedding concluded, the tension between them was palpable. Alicia and Brian returned to the hotel where they were staying. Although they slept separately, Alicia did not want to share a room with him. If she had the choice, she wouldn't want to be under the same roof as Brian for another second. However, Alicia felt exhausted because she was nearly 7 months pregnant. She had been on her feet all day, not only because of the wedding but also due to Brian's constant manipulation. All she wanted was to get some sleep. They were scheduled to leave the next morning, and she just needed to hold on a bit longer. Brian, on the other hand, was struggling to accept reality. He realized this was the end. Alicia had made her boundaries clear, and he was losing control over her for good, which sent him into a downward spiral. While Alicia managed to fall asleep, Brian sat nearby, drink in hand, watching her. He remained there for almost 2 hours, simmering with rage and darker thoughts. In a final, desperate attempt, he woke her and asked once more if she would go out with him. Alicia's response was a firm no. That one word triggered a violent reaction in Brian. In a fit of rage, he attacked Alicia as she lay in bed, suddenly awakened by the assault. She fought back, crying out for her life and for her unborn child, but Brian continued. In a horrific act, he took both Alicia's life and that of her baby. It is truly unimaginable to contemplate the last moments of Alicia, just a few hours away from going home, when she was attacked by the man who had tormented her for many years. Tragically, the nightmare didn't end there. After murdering Alicia, Brian committed another vile act by taking photos of her lifeless body. Eventually, he passed out in the bathtub. The next morning, he tried to end his life but was unsuccessful. Instead, he got out, still wet, and walked to a nearby gas station. The employees stared in disbelief as he approached the counter to ask for a phone. When the 911 operator answered and asked who the criminal was, Brian replied, with unsettling calm, that it was him and that he had done it. The police quickly arrived and arrested him on the spot. Alicia's life, filled with love and potential, was taken far too soon. She deserved much more, as did her baby. During a police interview, Brian confessed to all the accusations against him. However, in a desperate attempt to justify his actions, he claimed he and Alicia were in a romantic relationship. He asserted that he wanted a serious commitment, but Alicia did not. He even went so far as to say he backed off when he learned she was pregnant with another man's child, which was a complete lie. The only true aspect of Brian's story was his motive. Alicia had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. When the investigation continued, the police arrived at Sand Bay Beach Resort and entered the room where Brian and Alicia had stayed. Inside, they encountered a heartbreaking sight. Alicia lay lifeless on the bed, covered with a sheet, with a pillow placed under her head. It was evident that Brian had staged the scene before leaving. Officers then had the difficult task of informing Alicia's family of the tragic news. When an officer knocked on Sherry's door, she instinctively felt that something was wrong. The officer delivered the devastating news. Her daughter and unborn granddaughter were victims of homicide. Sherry's life was shattered, and she was overwhelmed with grief and guilt for not being able to protect her daughter and for not intervening with Brian sooner. Despite the family's immense pain, the investigation did not end there. Scrutinizing Brian's history revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Alicia was not his only victim. Another female coworker had accused him of groping her, causing her to leave her job after filing a complaint. He had a troubling history of abuse, including an incident in which he restrained a former girlfriend who didn't comply with him. Police discovered multiple complaints that Alicia had lodged against Brian, yet management had taken little to no action. Brian had secretly installed hidden cameras throughout his home and even in Alicia's hotel room. Unbeknownst to her, Alicia was recorded during ordinary activities, such as walking the dog or using the bathroom. This invasive surveillance was also discovered in the hotel where Alicia spent her final moments. Brian's actions constituted a severe violation of her privacy. Despite the substantial evidence against him, Brian pleaded not guilty, claiming that alcohol impaired his judgment and that he wasn't fully aware of his actions. The prosecution countered this by highlighting that he had a clear memory of events, including his contemplation of ending his life afterward and his call to 911 to confess that it had been him who did it. They argued that Brian had premeditated the murder, indicating it was not an impulsive act. Despite the evidence, the jury in the first trial was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. A year later, in a second trial, the evidence was presented again, and this time the jury found Brian Cooper guilty of 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, one for Alicia and one for her unborn child. On July 27, 2014, exactly 2 years after the tragedy, Brian Cooper received a sentence of 2 life terms in prison. He is currently incarcerated at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, a maximum security facility previously known as Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Notorious killers like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ed Gein have been housed there, as well as Chris Watts, who murdered his wife and daughters. Brian will never be released. The loss of Alicia and her baby created a tremendous void in her family. Overcome with anger, grief, and a desire for justice, Sherry decided that Alicia's life should be remembered for more than its tragic end. She established the Purple Project, named after Alicia's favorite color. This initiative aims to support single mothers, the group Alicia was part of when she needed help. The project also offers grief counseling for parents who have lost a child. One of its key events, the Night of Hope, was held on the 12th anniversary of Alicia's death, alongside grief retreats and community initiatives designed to bring hope out of tragedy. Additionally, Sherry filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Home Depot and Grand Flower growers to hold them accountable for failing to address Alicia's repeated pleas for help. Ultimately, the companies were found responsible for the deaths of Alicia and her baby. This case serves as a harsh reminder that workplace harassment can have fatal consequences. While it's easy to advise someone to leave a toxic job, the reality is often much more complex. Alicia needed that job and its paycheck. Tragically, Brian Cooper exploited her vulnerability. Hopefully, Alicia's story will encourage others to speak up and compel organizations to take the protection of their employees more seriously. The street was calm and peaceful late at night. Suddenly, the calm was broken by a noise. What happened next was shockingly violent and seemed carefully planned. The most troubling part was that she had warned others about the possibility of this event, but no one intervened. Alessandra Mattuzzi was born and raised in Italy and spent most of her life in the fashion industry. At 56, she worked as a sales representative for a boutique specializing in women's clothing. Those who knew her well described her as reliable, thoughtful, and elegant. She approached every task with precision and grace, whether assisting a customer or caring for a loved one. Alessandra was particularly known for her deep compassion. Her sense of duty went beyond her job. She had been her father's main caregiver during his final illness, providing unwavering support until his death. This experience left her emotionally exhausted. Afterward, she became withdrawn, avoiding social interactions and hesitating to form new relationships. Alessandra's daily life centered around her mother, who lived in a care home and needed constant care. She followed a regular routine that included frequent visits to her mother and daily phone calls with her younger sister, Stefania, with whom she had a strong bond. Although Alessandra was reserved, she maintained an online presence that showcased her life. Her social media accounts featured images of family gatherings, stylish work outfits, and quiet moments with her pet. She preferred calm environments and meaningful relationships over large social events. Everything changed in the summer of 2021 when she encountered a young man named Giovanni Padovani on social media. Giovanni, aged 27, was originally from Sicily. He lived an active lifestyle as a professional football player and part-time model. His social media was lively and well-followed, showcasing training sessions, travel adventures, and insights into photo shoots. His online persona was polished and charismatic, earning him admiration from many, particularly women. His friendly, approachable demeanor suggested he was both confident and down-to-earth. Despite their age difference, Alessandra and Giovanni connected easily from the start. Giovanni was respectful and kind, showing no signs of arrogance. As time went on, their messages became more frequent, transitioning from simple greetings to deeper conversations about their lives and feelings. Their digital exchanges developed into genuine emotional connections, and they began communicating almost daily. they sharing photos, life updates, and words of support. Eventually, Giovanni planned a visit to Alessandra in Bologna, where she lived. During his visit, he took the time to understand her world without being intrusive. One gesture that stood out was his offer to visit Alessandra's mother at the care home. This thoughtful act left a lasting impression, showing that he cared not only about Alessandra but also about the life she had built and the people she cherished. In the months that followed, Giovanni kept visiting Bologna. He and Alessandra spent peaceful moments together, walking around the city, cooking, and doing errands. He joined her in her daily activities and seemed to appreciate the slower pace of her life. He appeared to genuinely care for her, capturing their moments together in photos he occasionally shared online. In private messages, he expressed his support and affection for her. To onlookers, their relationship might have seemed surprising yet meaningful, as two very different lives came together. Shortly after the new year, the sense of security began to fade. Giovanni's behavior changed. He started calling more frequently, sometimes multiple times a day, and his questions became highly specific. What had once seemed like affectionate curiosity turned into suspicion. He wanted to know who she was talking to, what she was doing, and why. Their conversations morphed into interrogations filled with doubt. Then, he began accusing her of hiding things. There was no basis for his claims. His obsession extended beyond Alessandra. He started calling Stefania directly, trying to persuade her to adopt his distorted perspective. While he initially sought her support, his behavior grew increasingly erratic. His tone shifted from persuasive to aggressive. Stefania remembered how he used to yell during phone calls, his voice loud and full of accusations. Eventually, she cut all contact with him. In contrast, Alessandra chose to stay connected, believing that the difficult times would eventually pass. She tried to avoid arguments and calm the situation down in hopes of restoring balance. However, the man who had once seemed emotionally understanding became more controlling. His jealousy took hold, and even minor social media interactions, likes, photos, comments, sparked new conflicts. He demanded explanations for every little thing. As his obsession grew, so did his need for control. He began calling her at all hours of the night, and his messages shifted from sweet to overwhelming, and often filled with frustration or regret. Alessandra's sense of peace was shattered. His unpredictable moods drained her, and his expectations were unrealistic. Yet, he continued to intrude into her life in increasingly invasive ways. In early 2022, the situation worsened for Alessandra. After one of her visits, she discovered she was locked out of her email and social media accounts. When she tried to recover them, she found that the new passwords contained clues and references linked to Giovanni, making her suspect he had accessed her computer. The more she investigated, the more alarming things became. Her WhatsApp account was connected to a foreign device, and spyware was later found on her phone. This spyware allowed Giovanni not only to monitor her but also to read her messages, check her call logs, track her location in real time. His surveillance was intentional and methodical. Alessandra's suspicions were confirmed when Giovanni started mentioning private conversations she had never disclosed to him. He was aware of who she had communicated with and when. He challenged her with distorted interpretations of her online interactions, convinced she was being unfaithful despite having no evidence. His delusions intensified, and he demanded constant proof of her location, short videos every 10 minutes showing where she was and who she was with. When Alessandra refused to comply, he erupted in anger, threatening to end their relationship, accuse her of betrayal, or overwhelm her with messages until she complied. His demeanor became cold, controlling. Alessandra felt she was no longer an equal partner in the relationship. Instead, she felt watched, judged, and trapped. Giovanni's actions took a terrifying turn when he gained access to Alessandra's home surveillance system. He even sent a screenshot of her inside her apartment to her, revealing he had been watching her in what she thought was a safe space. By mid-2022, Giovanni's behavior became overtly predatory. He not only monitored her online but also started to follow her in person. He loitered around her apartment building in Bologna, appearing at strange hours without any notice. Neighbors began to take notice. One saw him attempting to enter the building, while another spotted him on the roof. He was no longer attempting to conceal his intentions. Her life became dominated by anxiety. Giovanni had become unpredictable and dangerous. The damage began to escalate. Someone tampered with her car, cutting its wiring and disabling the lights. In her apartment, the power was cut when someone removed the fuses. These incidents were more than just vandalism, they were deliberate attempts to force her to confront him. She heard shouting, loud bangs against her walls, and items being smashed in her home. At one point, he even climbed back onto the roof, trying to break in again. What had once seemed like affection had turned into obsession. All personal boundaries had been shattered. Alessandra, who once led a calm, structured life filled with routine, was now living in a constant state of fear. Alessandra was no longer in a relationship. She felt as though she was being hunted. She started carrying pepper spray. This small change marked a significant emotional shift for someone who once felt confident and graceful. Fear began to permeate her daily life. She confided in friends and family that returning home made her anxious. Sometimes, she sought comfort at her sister Stefania's house, but this relief was always temporary, and her dog had to stay in the apartment. Leaving her dog behind was not an option for Alessandra. This emotional connection forced her to return to a dangerous environment repeatedly. Between July and August, the situation grew more volatile. Alessandra shared her experiences of intimidation and increasing aggression with Stefania. Despite her fear, she was still searching for ways to calm the situation. She avoided direct confrontations, perhaps hoping that silence or a calm demeanor would lessen the obsession. However, Giovanni reacted to her distance by becoming even more aggressive, perceiving her withdrawal as a challenge that needed to be addressed. On July 29, 2022, Alessandra took an important step to protect herself by filing a police report. She documented Giovanni's obsessive behavior, his repeated invasions of her privacy, and his increasingly erratic presence near her home. To support her claims, she provided screenshots of messages, photos of him near her residence, and detailed accounts of the stalking that had troubled her for months. Despite this evidence, the police did not take urgent measures. Days went by, and her fear continued. On August 3rd, she returned to the police with more evidence, including additional sightings and further incidents of interference. Although she reiterated her concerns, the case was still considered in its early stages. Investigators acknowledged her claims, but no protective actions were recommended. There was no restraining order, no formal warning issued, and no police presence near her building. By August 8th, she went back to the police again because the harassment had not ceased. Giovanni still showed up near her home and tried to enter the building. She kept meticulous records of each incident, including car damage, power disruptions, and break-in attempts. His messages had also become more aggressive. Yet, the official response to her situation remained unchanged. A fourth visit took place on August 13th. By that time, Alessandra was both exhausted and terrified. She felt she was being watched, followed, and monitored online. Giovanni's control over her life invaded her personal communications and daily activities. She clearly expressed her fear for her life and provided the police with direct quotes from his messages, which contained threats and psychological manipulation. One of her statements was particularly chilling: "I don't want to die." It was not just a plea, it was a stark warning. However, this was insufficient to prompt urgent action from the authorities. They cited procedural limitations, saying that they needed more witness statements. The investigators minimized the threat because there had been no physical attack, treating the case as simple harassment rather than a potential for violence. They failed to recognize the serious situation unfolding before them. Her family would later contest this failure, asserting that the warnings had been clear, consistent, and serious. The progression of events was evident. What started as an obsession with digital activities escalated into physical intimidation. Giovanni's behavior shifted from being reactive to becoming calculated, repetitive, and dangerous. The most significant evidence emerged on August 20th, 2022, just 3 days before the incident. Giovanni made a checklist on his phone, which investigators later discovered in his Notes app. The list was precise, detailing items such as duct tape, a hammer, and restraints. Below the list was a written plan outlining steps to simulate a conversation, find a way to enter, and gather the necessary tools. The thoroughness of this plan eliminated any doubt about his intentions. This was not an act of impulsive anger, it was deliberate planning. On August 21st, Giovanni left Sicily, where he had been involved in football-related activities, and traveled to Senigallia under the pretense of personal business. He continued his journey, arrived in Bologna on August 22nd. Digital records later confirmed Giovanni's movements in unsettling detail. He entered Bologna quietly, without notifying anyone, including Alessandra. After arriving, he concealed the hammer in a bush near Alessandra's apartment building, placing it strategically in a hidden corner of the residential complex. He had thoroughly scouted the area beforehand, meticulously planning each step. That same day, he climbed to the rooftop of the building and watched Alessandra's movements from above. He had been watching her for months, but this time, he was ready to act. Weeks earlier, Giovanni had made a note on his phone, dated July 2nd, stating, "He will end her because she ended him emotionally." In the note, he portrayed himself as a victim, claiming he had been manipulated and abandoned, pushing him to his breaking point. He was fully aware of the consequences of his actions, writing, "He knows he will end up in prison. This note will explain to the police what she did to him." His intentions were clear. He had made this decision long before he traveled north. On the evening of August 23rd, Alessandra arrived home, unaware that Giovanni was waiting nearby. It was just after 9 p.m., and she was on the phone with her sister, Stefania, in a normal conversation built. As Alessandra approached the entrance of the building, Giovanni emerged from his hiding place. The attack happened in seconds. Stefania, still on the phone, noticed a sudden change. Alessandra's voice shifted, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle. In that brief moment, everything fell apart. Witnesses later reported seeing Giovanni attack her. He grabbed a hammer and struck her with such force that the hammerhead broke off the handle. However, he didn't stop there. Giovanni continued to hit her with his fists and then picked up a heavy wrought iron bench from just outside the entrance, using it to beat her repeatedly. He displayed extreme violence, delivering multiple devastating blows. Forensic reports later indicated that she had suffered over 20 traumatic injuries. Alessandra had visible injuries on her skull, chest, arms, and legs, showing evidence of a brutal assault. Her body was found with signs of blunt force trauma, severe fractures, and indications that she had been dragged on the ground. Despite the loud noises and chaos, Giovanni made no attempt to flee. When the police arrived, he was calmly sitting by the front door of the building, waiting. Officers noted his eerie composure. There was no struggle or remorse, only a chilling acceptance of his actions. Alessandra was taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, it was too late. Her injuries were severe, and she died shortly after arriving. The evidence was indisputable. His actions were deliberate, and he made no attempt to hide what he had done. The precision in his timing and the weapon's location revealed clear premeditation. Witnesses described him as quick and confident, as if he had rehearsed the act numerous times in his mind. Stefania's phone call, along with both physical and digital evidence, was essential for piecing together the timeline of events. The entire attack lasted just a few minutes, but it followed months of carefully planned psychological abuse. After his arrest, Giovanni was moved to a psychiatric facility. Initially, he chose to remain silent but later made statements blaming Alessandra for what happened, claiming she caused him emotional pain and had broken him. Investigators, however, recognized this as an attempt to mislead. The crime was clearly planned, documented, and carried out with disturbing precision. Although his defense team requested a psychiatric evaluation, court-appointed experts determined that he was fully aware of his actions. He showed obsessive and controlling behavior but did not qualify for an insanity defense. His mental state was intact, and he acted with intent. During sentencing, Giovanni spoke briefly, describing his experience as a nightmare. He told the court that if they considered him sane, he deserved the maximum penalty. He attempted to portray himself as a broken man, but the court was unaffected by his claims. His attempt to blame his victim fell apart under the weight of the evidence. On February 12, 2024, Giovanni Padovani was found guilty of stalking and the premeditated murder of Alessandra Mattuzzi. He was sentenced to life in prison. The court highlighted several aggravating factors: the cruelty of the attack, his lack of remorse, and the extensive psychological abuse that occurred before the crime. The consequences extended beyond the courtroom. Following Alessandra's death, a surge of online hostility targeted her on social media. Mean comments overwhelmed news articles, with strangers criticizing her looks, clothing, and age, as well as the age difference between her and Giovanni. Some even implied that she had provoked his actions. One of the most alarming remarks came from Donatello Alberti, was then director of Croce Bianca of Ferrara, who suggested that her appearance justified Giovanni's jealousy. The backlash was swift, resulting in Alberti's immediate removal from his position. Alessandra's family responded by filing complaints against 5 individuals for their online harassment. In an unusual move, the Bologna prosecutor's office initiated an investigation into this cyber harassment. This case set a significant legal precedent in Italy, marking one of the first times digital defamation against a deceased victim was prosecuted on such a scale. In the view of both the court and the public, Giovanni's actions were not only murder but also the final result of a prolonged campaign of control, psychological, digital, and physical, a heartbreaking example of a system that failed to intervene in time. Experts later recognized his behavior as classic Othello syndrome, a psychological condition characterized by delusional jealousy. Unlike normal jealousy, this disorder involves persistent, irrational thoughts and doubts about a partner's fidelity, along with an inability to accept reality. In severe cases, it can lead to violence, as was the tragic outcome for Alessandra, who lost her life due to this condition. Alessandra Mattuzzi's life, defined by compassion and grace, was cruelly ended on August 23, 2022, by Giovanni Padovani's calculated violence, despite her desperate pleas for protection. While his life sentence on February 12, 2024, delivered justice, it could not erase the pain of her family, particularly her sister Stefania, nor the sting of a system that failed to act on her warnings. Alessandra's legacy as a devoted daughter, sister, and professional endures, her warmth forever etched in the hearts of those she loved. Her family's fight against post-murder cyber harassment, culminating in a groundbreaking Italian legal precedent, has sparked vital conversations about digital abuse and victim blaming. Though her loss remains a stark reminder of unchecked stalking and domestic violence, Alessandra's memory fuels a call for stronger protections to ensure no one else suffers her fate. Addiction can completely dominate a person's mind and will, leading them to engage in disturbing, harmful behaviors. This dependency can stem from various sources, such as alcohol, banned substance, gambling, or even unhealthy relationships, and its impacts can be equally damaging. While some people eventually recognize that they have become trapped by their addictions, many others ignore the problem. Unfortunately, this denial often leads to a worsening situation. The tragic story of Donna Munda and Ghulam Munda is not an isolated case. In 2005, it sent shockwaves through the peaceful town of Hermitage. They was well known and admired by locals, almost like celebrities. Ghulam was a respected physician who owned his clinic, while Donna was exceptionally beautiful and nearly 24 years younger than him. To everyone who knew them, they appeared to have a perfect and successful relationship. However, on a warm day in May, a single gunshot shattered this facade, revealing a much darker reality marked by betrayal, dependency, and greed. Ghulam grew up in the slums of Gujarat, India. From a young age, he faced the harsh realities of poverty and hunger. These tough conditions shaped his strong character, motivated him to escape poverty and create a better life for himself. He worked hard, focused on excellence, and aspiring to become a doctor. After completing high school, Ghulam was accepted into a medical university, where he quickly became one of the top students. His hard work paid off when he was offered an internship at a prestigious clinic in the United States. There, He worked in the urology department and quickly gained a reputation as a promising young specialist with a bright future. After his internship, Ghulam received an attractive job offer and chose to remain in the U.S. He also began applying for U.S. citizenship. By the mid-1970s, he had moved to Hermitage, Pennsylvania, a small town with a population of just over 16,000. There, he opened his own clinic specializing in urological care. His career quickly flourished. Ghulam became a top professional, utilizing advanced technology and the latest equipment in his practice. His clinic gained a reputation as one of the best in the state. He accepted the most difficult and seemingly hopeless cases, attracting patients from both near and far, including overseas. Dr. Ghulam was well respected not only for his medical skills but also for his kindness. He frequently provided free medical care and often paid for expensive medications for patients who couldn't afford them. His compassion was rooted in his own challenging childhood, which motivated him to help others in need. With a prosperous medical practice, Ghulam enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. He purchased an opulent home in a prestigious area and embraced a life filled with enjoyment. He believed in making the most of life and investing in what made him happy, such as gourmet food, traveling, luxury watches, rare collectibles, high-end cars, and spending time with attractive companions. In his 40s, Ghulam was still single when he noticed a young woman named Donna walking down the street and fell for her immediately. Donna was 24 years younger than him. She came from a religious Catholic family and had just graduated from high school when she met him. At first, she was hesitant about his interest, but over time, she accepted his generous gifts and let him pursue her. Donna's family struggled financially and couldn't afford a prestigious college education. When Ghulam found out about her situation, he offered to pay for her tuition because she wanted to work in healthcare. He supported her journey to become a registered nurse and later funded her master's degree in anesthesiology. Donna and her partner's romantic, Ghulam, relationship started several years after their initial meeting. Interestingly, even though they had strong religious values, Donna's parents accepted their relationship. They appreciated the kind, generous doctor who had helped support their daughter's education and overall well-being. Donna later became a highly skilled nurse anesthetist, secured a job at a prominent medical center. Ghulam continued to encourage her ambitions, supported her career advancement. They lived in Ghulam's luxurious home, where he gave Donna to an expensive car, lavish jewelry, and trips to fancy vacation destinations. When Donna turned 30, Ghulam, who was 54 at the time, proposed to her, and she accepted. They celebrated their engagement with an extravagant wedding ceremony that had over 150 guests, including family, friends, and many of Ghulam's business associates. It appeared that they were on their way to a long, happy life together. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Donna and Ghulam gained fame as local celebrities and were probably the richest people in their town. They enjoyed a luxurious life, traveling frequently, and the doctor generously indulged his much younger wife. They frequently attended charity galas and was always spotted together at public events. Donna chose to prioritize her career and took her time before starting a family. Ghulam supported her decision without any pressure. Many saw Donna as cheerful, friendly, and lively, which was the image she projected, until tragedy started to turn her life upside down. At 37 years old, Donna lost her father after a long illness, which hit her hard. She had always had a close bond with him, referring to herself as a daddy's girl and seeing him as her main source of strength. After he died, Donna became deeply depressed. She isolated herself from others. Ghulam did his best to support her, fulfilling all her wishes, including a trip to Hawaii to help her feel better. However, nothing seemed to work except for antidepressants, which she started taking in larger doses. Donna immersed herself in work, hoping to find solace in her daily routine, but it didn't truly alleviate her suffering. A few years later, she was diagnosed with a kidney condition that caused intense back pain. Even though her husband was a well-known urologist, he couldn't fully relieve her discomfort. The treatments only offered temporary relief, and her symptoms kept coming back, often worse than before. In her desperation, Donna started to rely heavily on strong pain medication. She began secretly taking doses from her workplace, where she was responsible for managing and administering medications. This made it easy for her to take small amounts without being noticed. She would quietly use portions meant for patients, just enough so that no one would realize. Together with her antidepressants, the prescription painkillers dulled her physical and emotional pain. Donna felt abandoned by the world and overwhelmed by her struggles. As a result, she began to distance herself from Ghulam, even though he genuinely cared for her. Things quickly deteriorated. She became increasingly dependent on her medications, to the point where she could not function without them. This led her to raise her dosages and steal more often. Eventually, her behavior attracted attention. She was caught in the act, and there was no way to deny it. Her dismissal from the clinic was shocking, and she faced multiple criminal charges. Ghulam quickly intervened to defend his wife, managed the situation to safeguard her reputation. Thanks to his actions, their friends and family never learned about Donna's problem. Rather than facing jail time, she paid a hefty fine and committed to rehabilitation at a specialized center. Ghulam chose the facility himself and organized Donna's stay, informing relatives, neighbors, and friends that she was on vacation. No one doubted him. He stayed calm, convincing, continued to appear cheerful and friendly. At the rehab center, Donna, who is now in her 40s, met a younger man named Damien Bradford, who was 23 years old. Damien had a history of multiple offenses for distributing illegal substances and ended up in rehab after a serious overdose that almost killed him. Despite their age difference, Donna and Damien quickly became very close, spent a lot of time together. They faced similar challenges. Although their relationship was unexpected, their bond deepened rapidly. What started as simple conversations turned into a passionate affair. Donna's husband was nearing 70 years old. Due to his age and health problems, their physical relationship had significantly diminished. In contrast, Damien was young, energetic, fit, and undeniably attractive. He dedicated a lot of time to the gym, often used steroids and various supplements to maintain his physique. It's unclear why Damien was attracted to a woman 2 decades his senior, but for Donna, he felt like a breath of fresh air, rekindling emotions she thought were long gone. She fully embraced this connection, quickly became emotionally invested. Even though the rehabilitation center had strict rules prohibiting romantic relationships among patients, the two secretly began dating. They found secluded spots to meet, such as storage rooms and restrooms. The thrill of being caught only seemed to strengthen their connection. Donna became so invested in the relationship that she couldn't envision her life without him. Their romance continued after they left the rehab facility. Damien was a caring partner who gave Donna plenty of attention, called her sweet names, and truly enjoyed making her feel valued. He may have developed genuine feelings for Donna, a sophisticated and self-assured woman who clearly looked after herself. At this point, Donna was not working anymore but had complete access to her husband's bank accounts and could spend as she pleased. Ghulam never scrutinized her spending or asked about her expenses. Taking advantage of this, Donna started showering Damien with lavish gifts, designer clothes, and accessories, while also covering all of his living expenses. She even rented a cozy apartment for them to meet privately. As a result, Damien became financially dependent on his wealthy partner, but neither of them appeared to have any concerns about it. When warned about his wife's affair, Ghulam had long suspected that something was off and noticed changes in Donna's behavior, but he had decided not to confront her about it. He realized that she was much younger and had emotional and physical needs that he could no longer fulfill. Gradually, he accepted that their passion had faded. Instead of reacting angrily, he calmly asked Donna if they should consider ending their relationship. Donna was shocked to learn that Ghulam knew about her affair. She explained that it was merely a temporary distraction that happened during a tough period in her life. She had met the younger man while in rehab, when she was feeling vulnerable and needed support. He seemed to understand her struggles better than anyone else. Despite this, she assured Ghulam that he was still the person she loved, promised to end her relationship with the younger man, emphasizing that he didn't truly matter to her. Ghulam felt moved by her words. He chose to trust her, forgave her, and decided they could move forward together as if nothing had happened. Damien had become Donna's overwhelming dependency, which she couldn't easily escape. She felt a strong attraction to him and, in his presence, experienced feelings of youth, desire, and genuine care. Her thoughts were focused on one main goal: eliminating the obstacle to her happiness, her husband. The affair continued at the apartment she had rented for Damien. Although they were more cautious now, Ghulam believed their relationship was over, while Donna planned to maintain it. When they couldn't meet in person, they stayed in constant contact, calling up to 20 times a day and exchanging hundreds of messages. Donna had no plans to let go of her boyfriend. Donna had selfish reasons for not wanting a divorce. She feared losing her financial stability. Before marrying Ghulam, they signed a prenuptial agreement that would limit her settlement to $250,000 if they separated. However, after Ghulam found out about her infidelity, he tried to keep the situation under control and offered to raise her settlement to $1 million. Donna turned down the offer, persuading Ghulam that she still loved him and wished to save their marriage. In reality, though, Ghulam's wealth had increased to nearly $12 million. Motivated by greed, Donna wanted everything, immediate access to wealth so she and Damien could live the way they wanted without restrictions. Every time they met, Donna portrayed Ghulam as a controlling tyrant who emotionally suffocated her and treated her like an object. She wanted Damien to see her husband as an enemy who deserved revenge for the emotional pain he supposedly caused her. Her manipulative stories worked well. A dark plan began to form in Donna's troubled mind, one she intended to execute with the help of her young lover. She believed that since Ghulam was much older and had several chronic health issues, his time was running out anyway. So, she thought, why not hasten the inevitable? To Donna, this seemed like the ideal solution. No one would disrupt her new life, and she would legally inherit all of Ghulam's assets, properties, and wealth as his surviving spouse. She shared her plan with Damien, offering him half of Ghulam's fortune in exchange for his help with a problem. Damien quickly agreed. The promise of a large payout clouded his judgment. Together, they began devising the crime. People who knew Ghulam were aware that he often carried a large amount of cash in his wallet. He frequently joked that anyone who tried to rob him would leave satisfied. Donna and Damien decided to exploit this, planning the crime to appear as a failed mugging that escalated into a tragic event. Developing the plan took nearly 2 months, as Donna and her accomplice carefully considered every detail to avoid mistakes. During this time, Donna portrayed the perfect devoted wife. She stayed close to her husband, accompanied him everywhere, and made sure no one suspected any issues in their marriage. Friends and neighbors genuinely thought they were a happy couple, and even Ghulam was convinced of it. Their initial attempt to execute the plan did not go well. Damien was meant to ambush Ghulam as he left the hospital and headed to his car in the parking lot. However, the area was crowded with people, prompting Damien to back out due to the fear of too many witnesses. It took them another month to devise a new strategy. This time, they aimed to attack on a deserted road where no one would be present to intervene. The plan was straightforward. Damien would follow their car at a safe distance, and Donna would stop at a designated location, pretending there was a medical emergency. They set the date for Friday, May 13, 2005. On that day, Dr. Ghulam planned to visit a neighboring state to look at a house he wanted to buy as a wedding gift for his nephew, Farrokh Munda. Donna offered to go with him, but her 72-year-old mother, Dorothy Smouse, who was visiting at the time, insisted on joining. Donna tried to talk her out of it, but Ghulam didn't see any issue with her coming along and agreed to let his mother-in-law participate. Damien, dressed entirely in black and wearing ski goggles to conceal his identity, waited in his car for a message from Donna indicating that their vehicle had left the house. Once he received the signal, he followed the predetermined route, maintaining a safe distance behind. After stopping to refuel, Donna took over driving to keep control over their timing. While traveling along a deserted highway, she pretended to feel ill and pulled over, claiming she needed to take some medication. At that moment, a black Volkswagen approached from behind. A man in ski goggles jumped out, ran to the passenger side where Ghulam was sitting, pointed a gun at him, and demanded his wallet. Ghulam complied without resistance, handed over his wallet. However, as soon as the attacker received the money, he shot Ghulam in the head and quickly returned to his vehicle, driving away rapidly. Ghulam died instantly from the gunshot. Donna then called emergency services, crying and screaming as she begged them to save her husband. She acted so convincingly like a distraught widow that, at first, no one suspected she could have been involved in the incident. Inconsistencies in the testimonies appeared quickly. Right from the initial interviews, it was evident that something was not right. Donna stated she didn't see the attacker or his vehicle, everything happened too quickly, and she was in shock. In contrast, her mother provided a different account. She claimed she saw both the shooter and the car clearly. According to her, the person who shot her son-in-law was a young black man driving a black Volkswagen. This assertion visibly upset Donna, who argued with her mother, insisting that she must have been mistaken. However, her mother remained firm and began to add more specific details. Donna contended that they had stopped the car because Ghulam requested it, while her mother claimed it was Donna who stopped the car, as illness. Investigators were also puzzled as to why the assailant only targeted one person while leaving two possible witnesses unharmed. 2 days after the incident, Dr. Ghulam's widow held a press conference where she answered reporters' questions with tears in her eyes. She made a heartfelt appeal to the public, urging anyone with information about the case to come forward and help with the investigation. Shortly after the press conference, the police received a phone call from a woman who claimed that Donna was actually the mastermind behind the incident and that she had been assisted by her lover, Damian Bradford. The caller also provided details such as the make and license plate number of Damian's car, as well as his home address. This caller considered herself to be Damian's fiancée. She had been closely monitoring the couple and shared all the information she had gathered. On the same day, police arrested Damian and searched his apartment. Although he had managed to get rid of the weapon, for some unknown reason, he kept the victim's wallet and brought it home. Inside the wallet, they found about $3,000 in cash, several bank cards belonging to Dr. Ghulam, and a photo of Donna. Authorities also discovered clothes with small blood stains that matched the doctor's. Damian was arrested and taken into custody. He mistakenly believed that his wealthy lover would help him and somehow secure his release. However, Donna, fearing for her own safety, chose to stay silent, hoping that all the blame would fall on Damian, especially since the evidence against him was overwhelming. When prosecutors told Damian that he might face the death penalty, he decided to cooperate with them in exchange for a shorter sentence. He disclosed the entire plan, provided text messages and documents, including evidence that Donna had purchased the car he was driving. In July 2007, Damian pleaded guilty to the crime and testified in court, explaining all the details of the scheme. Because he cooperated, he was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison. Donna was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on September 21, 2007, for the murder for hire conviction, with an additional 360 months to run concurrently on the remaining charges. Despite Donna's numerous appeals, the court upheld the original sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Tallahassee Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, Florida. After being released on supervised release in 2020, Damian Bradford was arrested again on July 29, 2022, following an altercation with state police at the Franklin Mini Mart in Aliquippa. During his struggle with an officer, Bradford fired a shot at the officer, hitting him in the leg. Damian was convicted of attempted murder and aggravated assault on the officer, sentenced to 36.5 to 73 years in state prison in November 2023. In December of that year, the district court added a consecutive 10-year sentence for violating the terms of his supervised release. As of press time, Damian is serving his sentence at the Albion State Correctional Institution, located in Albion, Pennsylvania. The murder of Dr. Ghulam Munda on May 13, 2005, shattered the illusion of a perfect life in Hermitage, Pennsylvania, exposing a chilling tale of addiction and betrayal. Donna Munda, 23 years younger than her devoted husband, succumbed to a dependency on painkillers and an obsessive affair with Damian Bradford, leading her to orchestrate Ghulam's death for his $12 million estate. Ghulam's kindness and medical legacy endure in the community's memory, marked by tributes in 2025, while his tragic end serves as a stark warning of addiction's power to corrupt and destroy, urging greater vigilance to prevent such devastations. On July 29, 2016, Gabriella and her younger sister, Sunilda, started their day as usual. That evening, they planned to visit a nearby internet cafe to work on some school assignments. Because they didn't have internet at home, these trips to the local cafe had become a regular part of their lives. Going to the cafe was how they accessed the internet to stay connected and complete their assignments. Around 6 p.m., Gabriella and Sunilda left the house as usual, without causing any concern. But after walking a few blocks, Gabriella abruptly changed her mind. She told Sunilda that she wouldn't be accompanying her and that she was going to see her boyfriend instead. Sunilda was a little surprised but didn't ask any questions. Gabriella had gone off alone before. Gabriella assured her she would return soon, then walked away in the opposite direction. That was the last time the two sisters saw each other. Sunilda went to the cafe by herself. That evening, when she got home, she realized that Gabriella still wasn't back yet. Al principio, nadie le dio mucha importancia. Es como que los adolescentes se queden fuera hasta tarde, especialmente en verano. Sin embargo, a medida que anochecia, la preocupación empezó a aumentar. Liliana, their mother, tried to call Gabriella but got no answer. She sent messages on WhatsApp, which at first were not read. Later, the messages appeared as read, but Gabriella never replied. It was clear someone was seeing the messages, but not responding. Panic set in when a young man, whom the family believed to be Gabriella's boyfriend, showed up at their door. He asked a question that stunned everyone, because they had all assumed that Gabriella was with him. His confusion seemed real. He truly didn't know where she was. That moment changed everything. Until then, everyone had just thought Gabriella was out later than usual. If her boyfriend hadn't seen her that night, it's possible she never made it to meet him. That's when her family realized something was wrong. Sunilda remembered watching Gabriella turn a corner in the direction of a boarding house where one of their relatives had once lived. At the time, it hadn't seemed significant. The next morning, it was obvious that Gabriella was missing. Her phone was still active, but she didn't answer any calls. The mood at home grew tense. Her loved ones started reaching out to everyone they knew, relatives, friends, even her father, but nobody knew where she was. It seemed as though she had vanished without a trace. The family decided to take official action. Liliana contacted the local authorities, who then opened the missing person case. Soon after, flyers about the case were posted around the neighborhood. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers helped with the search. However, after Gabriella turned the corner and left her sister behind, no one saw her again. Gabriella Verol was born in Argentina in 1998 to Bolivian parents. Her parents separated when she was 6 years old. After her parents separated, Gabriella lived with her mother, Liliana Cham, and later started calling another man, Cesar Garcia, her father. He became her stepfather. Sunilda and other relatives from Liliana's family also lived in the same house. Life at home was difficult. The family made great efforts to create a stable home and meet their basic needs, but the atmosphere was often tense and arguments happened frequently. Gabriella frequently had stressful encounters with her grandmother, and their arguments were much more heated than typical family disputes. The adults were emotionally distant and didn't understand her, which constantly made her feel under pressure. During her teenage years, Gabriella faced the typical challenges of growing up. However, living in a home without personal space or privacy made these difficulties even harder for her. She didn't have a good place to rest or study. She dreamed of living with her biological father, who lived apart from her with another family. Pero ese deseo nunca se cumplió. Al no mantuvo una comunicación constante y también estaba enfrentando sus propios problemas personales. Eventually, the situation at home became too difficult for Gabriella to handle. She decided to leave, taking her younger sister Sunilda with her. For a time, they stayed at the house of their Aunt Marisol, their father's sister. The two sisters hadn't planned to leave permanently or thought it through carefully, but their leaving was a sign that something was wrong. They stayed at their aunt's house for about a week. Life there was more peaceful and there was less strict adult supervision, but this brief period didn't result in any lasting changes. When Gabriella returned to her mother's house, she once again found herself surrounded by the same pressure and stress she had tried to get away from. Although Gabriella was quiet, she was clearly independent. She wore simple clothes, avoided drawing attention to herself, and stayed away from noisy or boisterous groups. However, she was still ambitious. She often envisioned a future in which she could shape her own life. Unfortunately, her limited resources made it difficult to pursue those dreams. She didn't have a computer or reliable internet access at home. Even basic things like homework required her to walk to the nearest internet cafe. As mentioned before, this demanded extra planning and often led to more stress at home. In addition to these daily difficulties, Gabriella also felt a strong sense of emotional distance. Her opinions were often ignored, and her needs were rarely prioritized. Even within her own family, she felt more like an outsider than a real member. She never openly argued with her mother, Liliana. However, Liliana was always so overwhelmed by her responsibilities that she often didn't notice what her daughter was experiencing. Gabriella's stepfather fulfilled his duties, but they never developed a close relationship. There was always a distance between them. Over the years, all of this made Gabriella feel increasingly isolated. She didn't feel safe at home, and she couldn't see any realistic way to find support or make a change outside of it. Life felt like a cycle she couldn't escape, where any progress depended entirely on her own efforts. At home, there was a shortage of resources, emotional support, and space for her to grow. Her desire for independence was no longer just a normal part of growing up, it became a true necessity. This mindset began to guide her choices and actions over time. Against this emotionally vulnerable but outwardly calm backdrop, a series of events began to unfold. These events would eventually lead to devastating consequences. Nestor Quintana, born in 1986, was married to Elizabeth Cham, who is Gabriella's maternal aunt. This marriage made Nestor a member of Gabriella's family, and they frequently saw each other, as they lived in the same household. For a long time, no one in the family had any concerns about his behavior. They saw him as calm, reliable, and responsible, with a respectable job at the Argentine Prefecture, a federal security agency. He didn't raise any red flags. He stayed out of arguments, helped with household chores, and was present at family gatherings. He was a quiet part of everyday life. He lived with his wife and her family, ate meals with them, took part in family gatherings, and helped with daily chores. To those around him, he seemed like a reliable and discreet adult who handled family matters appropriately and never overstepped his boundaries. Over time, small, isolated incidents began to occur, minor things that didn't seem concerning at first, such as a strange remark or an odd situation. There was no single event, but these details gradually changed how people saw him. After he and Elizabeth separated, Nestor left the family home. He moved into a low-cost boarding house near the area where his family still lived. At the time, his relatives thought this was simply the usual thing to do after a marriage ended. This move marked a turning point. It began a new phase in which his behavior slowly changed from neutral to unsettling, even though no one could clearly describe why they felt uneasy. Even though Nestor no longer lived with the family, he still kept in touch with them, especially with Gabriella. As time passed, people started noticing that he was spending more and more time alone with her. These meetings took place outside the home, in neutral locations. Neighbors who witnessed these interactions were unsure how to interpret them. One man remembered seeing Gabriella and Nestor together on a bus. Gabriella was sitting on Nestor's lap while he softly stroked her hair. The man felt uncomfortable watching this but chose not to mention it to the family. He later admitted that he hesitated because he was afraid of causing a scene or damaging family relationships. He decided not to say anything. Other people in the neighborhood reported seeing similar things. Several residents had seen Gabriella near the boarding house where Nestor lived. At times, she would go into the building, remain there for an hour or two, and then leave quietly. No one expressed any concern when this happened. Because Nestor had once been married to Gabriella's aunt, no one thought their interactions were unusual at first. Their family relationship led people to trust them and not question their meetings. Gabriella never told anyone she visited him, and there was no obvious reason to suspect anything improper was happening. They also had no formal relationship. Nestor was not her guardian and had no legal right to be involved in her life. However, he was still somewhat connected to the family, so his actions were considered personal decisions and were not subject to supervision. Gabriella's family didn't keep track of where she was, believing she was either with friends or running errands. It was later revealed that many of their meetings took place at the boarding house where Nestor had rented a small room. He often invited Gabriella there, and they kept their visits private. She would arrive by herself and leave without drawing attention. Over time, their relationship changed in ways that went beyond simple familial affection. At the time, however, none of the adults realized how deep their connection had become. Even after his marriage to Elizabeth ended, Gabriella continued to seek contact with him. She never talked about what happened during those visits or shared any details with anyone. Only after she disappeared did people begin to understand the whole story, the clues they had previously missed. At first, there was no clear indication that Gabriella had any reason to keep secrets. She seemed calm and friendly around her relatives, but it later became clear that her relationship with Nestor was something she could not discuss openly. Reportedly, their connection began when Gabriella was just 13. At that point, Nestor was already a grown man, employed in a federal security role and married to her maternal aunt, which made the situation even more troubling. He was not just a stranger, he was a trusted adult in her home, connected to her family, and seen as safe by everyone around her. The first details of this story began to emerge when the investigation started. Friends who had never shown much interest in Gabriella's personal life began to comment. Several people admitted that they had suspected for years that something was wrong between her and Nestor. Some recalled seeing him repeatedly near Gabriella's school, offering her rides or finding reasons to be there. At first, his actions appeared to be motivated by concern, but over time they became more obsessive. The way he behaved was not what you would normally expect from a family member. He monitored her social life, tracked whom she spoke to, and showed signs of jealousy. Gabriella tried to maintain normal friendships, but Nestor's influence made her feel increasingly restricted. People close to her said that he constantly tried to contact her, often calling her repeatedly if she didn't answer immediately. Those who witnessed how urgently he needed to know her whereabouts at all times recognized this as a warning sign. In later messages used as evidence, he accused her of being distant, demanded explanations for her actions, and insisted that she account for how she spent her time when she wasn't with him. These were not isolated incidents, they formed a consistent pattern of controlling and obsessive behavior. Classmates remembered times when Gabriella would only attend events if he gave her permission. Initially, it appeared as if she was simply dealing with strict family rules or a difficult home situation. No one realized that the true reason was the pressure from an adult man who maintained a controlling environment around her. A close friend later recalled that Gabriella had once confided in her, saying she hadn't felt free in a long time and asking her to keep it a secret. At the time, it seemed like something typical a teenager might say. Later, those words would take on much deeper significance. Through the voice messages Nestor sent Gabriella, investigators made a disturbing discovery. He saw her as someone he possessed. In the recordings, his tone shifted between pleading and demanding. He accused her of cheating, doubted her honesty, and repeatedly insisted that she prove her loyalty. When Gabriella began spending time with someone her own age, Nestor started to act increasingly hostile. He made it clear that he could not tolerate her being close to anyone else, not even her friends. The investigation found that this caused tensions between them to escalate even further during that period. As Gabriella grew more distant, Nestor intensified his efforts to regain control. Meanwhile, her friends noticed that Gabriella's emotional well-being was deteriorating. She became increasingly anxious and withdrawn, and she stopped talking about her future. When she tried to leave Nestor, he responded by ramping up his manipulation. He pressured her psychologically, used emotional blackmail, made threats, and tried to make her feel guilty. Relatives living nearby had no idea this was happening. As investigators examined his actions more closely, a clear pattern emerged. He not only violated personal boundaries, but also purposely created a relationship of dependence by taking advantage of his age, his authority, and the trust the family placed in him. Gabriella's friends later confessed that, while they sensed something was wrong, they did not realize the seriousness of the situation. She remained silent out of fear, shame, and the conviction that no one would believe her if she told the truth. This silence allowed Nestor to maintain control over her for years. Gabriella grew up in a home without adequate support, which left her vulnerable. A man, initially only a relative, entered her life and gradually became a dominant presence from whom she could not escape. This situation paved the way for the tragedy that followed. After Gabriella went missing, the police launched an initial investigation. They questioned her sister, her mother, the young man she was dating, and several other acquaintances. Officers began searching the neighborhood and spoke with residents living within a few blocks of where Gabriella was last seen with her sister. Several witnesses reported seeing her later that evening walking down the street with a man. One witness specifically remembered seeing them heading toward the boarding house. Investigators believe that, given the time and place, Gabriella may have intentionally gone there. Meanwhile, some of Gabriella's friends, previously too afraid to speak up, began providing information. As more evidence was gathered, it became clear that Gabriella's disappearance was not accidental. There were no signs that she had run away or made a sudden decision to leave. She left without taking any belongings or informing anyone of her plans. After Nestor Quintana was identified as a person of interest, authorities brought him in for questioning. Initially, he appeared confident. He claimed he had not been in contact with the family for a long time, that he no longer knew anything about Gabriella's life, and that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. He explained that he stayed out of family matters because he and Elizabeth were divorced. At first, his answers seemed consistent. However, investigators soon found several contradictions. Neighbors and other residents reported seeing Nestor still meeting with Gabriella. Witnesses often saw them together near the boarding house, and her friends stated he behaved in a controlling manner, evidence that directly contradicted his previous statements. The investigators intensified their questioning. Nestor was summoned for additional interviews, and with each session, he grew less confident. He began muddling the timeline, changing his story, and avoiding direct questions. Even those who had initially believed he was not involved began to have doubts. The situation shifted noticeably a few days after the investigation gained momentum. Nestor arrived at the police station without prior notice and asked to speak with an officer. This time, he admitted to having had contact with Gabriella and claimed to know where she was. Then he made a confession that changed the whole investigation. He stated that, as on previous occasions, he met with Gabriella on the evening of July 29th. According to him, they had an argument that night. Nestor said the argument escalated and, during the struggle, he lost control and accidentally killed Gabriella by strangling her. He revealed the precise location of her body, explaining that he had hidden it in his room at the boarding house, wrapped in bed sheets and plastic. He claimed that he had acted impulsively during an emotional breakdown and had not planned the act in advance. Police quickly proceeded to the location he mentioned. There, in the room he had rented, investigators discovered Gabriella's body. It was carefully wrapped in several layers of fabric and plastic bags and placed in the corner of the room. Forensic specialists arrived at the scene, determining that the body had been in the room for several days. However, because the room was sealed, decomposition had been limited. Investigators collected all nearby items for forensic examination. An initial autopsy determined that the cause of death was manual strangulation. No signs of sexual assault were found, so investigators ruled out such a motive. However, the main question remained unanswered. If the motive was not sexual assault, what provoked such a violent reaction? Some believe the act resulted from long-term emotional stress, jealousy, and an adult's inability to accept Gabriella's growing independence. Only further interviews and psychological assessments could confirm whether this theory was correct. The authorities informed Gabriella's family of Neuster's confession. The shock was immense. Her mother, stepfather, and other relatives could not believe that someone they had lived with was capable of such an act. Neuster, once regarded as a caring uncle, had now admitted to causing her death. For many people, the news was more than just devastating. It completely destroyed their trust in those closest to them. Cesar Garcia, Gabriella's stepfather, told reporters that he was struggling to understand what had happened. He said that Neuster had never acted suspiciously and was always seen as a trustworthy, ordinary family member. Gabriella's sister, Sunsilda, did not make any public statements and remained in shock. Their mother was so overwhelmed by emotion that she burst into tears. The family's grief was made even worse by a profound sense of betrayal. Although Neuster confessed, the investigation continued. Law enforcement needed to confirm whether his statements were true and to ensure he was not withholding any other information. His claim that his actions were caused by an emotional outburst was questionable, especially since he had carefully concealed the body. Investigators also looked into whether Neuster was trying to minimize his role in order to receive a reduced sentence. This issue became part of the case as it proceeded to trial. After Gabriella's body was found and a confession was made, Neuster Quintana's case entered the formal criminal investigation stage, and he was officially charged. However, during the very first court hearing, the situation changed unexpectedly when Neuster suddenly retracted his confession. He stated that the police had pressured him, used psychological coercion, and had not properly informed him of his rights. This new statement formed the basis of his defense strategy. Neuster's lawyer promptly took action to dispute all evidence that had been gathered from the confession. He claimed that the boarding house was searched illegally because there was no valid warrant. The defense also requested the exclusion of text messages, voice recordings, and witness testimonies that were collected before a lawyer was present. They argued that Neuster was mentally unstable at the time and could not understand the consequences of his words. Prosecutors remained resolute. The lead attorney stressed that Neuster's confession was both voluntary and detailed. He also pointed out that Neuster provided exact directions to where Gabriella's body was found, arguing that such specific information could not have been a coincidence. Furthermore, evidence was collected that revealed a long-term pattern of control by the accused over Gabriella, including indications of psychological manipulation and jealousy. A key piece of evidence was finding Neuster's DNA under Gabriella's fingernails, which clearly showed there had been a physical struggle. Several witnesses testified in court. Gabriella's friends spoke about the emotional distress she experienced in the months before she disappeared, describing how Neuster tried to control her, limited her social interactions, and put her under significant emotional pressure. During the proceedings, a message was read aloud in which Neuster made threats. The content had a significant impact on the jury, prompting the defense to adjust its strategy. They described Neuster as someone who was emotionally unstable and acted impulsively due to extreme stress. They stated that his relationship with Gabriella was mutual but unofficial, and that what happened was not premeditated. These claims angered Gabriella's family. Her stepfather, in particular, spoke out after several hearings, saying that attempts to defend the accused were disrespectful to Gabriella's memory. During the trial, Gabriella's mother, Liliana, remained composed and attended every session. The family was clear and united in saying that this was not a domestic dispute. It was a betrayal that ended a life already controlled and suppressed. Their lawyers argued that this was not only a breach of trust, but Neuster's position as a family member made it even worse. The prosecution requested the harshest penalty, life in prison, because of the seriousness of the crime. They pointed to the close family relationship between those involved, the long-term psychological manipulation, and the deliberate effort to conceal the body. Once both sides gave their closing arguments, the jury was sent out to deliberate and make their decision. Tension filled the courtroom. Gabriella's family sat quietly, anxiously awaiting the verdict. When the jury returned, the foreperson announced the decision: guilty of first-degree murder, with aggravating factors due to the family relationship and gender-based violence. The judge delivered the sentence without delay. Neuster Quintana was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court dismissed the defense's argument that the confession was coerced, noting that it contained detailed information and was supported by physical evidence. The fact that there had also been long-term psychological control made the charges even more serious. Nuester remained expressionless as the verdict was announced. His lawyers sat in silence, staring at the floor. Across the courtroom, Gabriella's mother began to cry, and her husband held her in his arms. This was not a victory, but a painful farewell. Justice had been served, yet their daughter was lost forever. Marilena Rosari was a 58-year-old woman living with her husband in Castellanza, Italy. They had 2 grown daughters who lived on their own and had children of their own, making Marilena a grandmother. She worked as a promoter in supermarkets located in the province of Varese. By 2017, she viewed herself as a successful individual, enjoying a peaceful life while taking care of her family. On Sunday, July 30, 2017, Marilena and her husband visited a mutual friend's house for dinner in a nearby town. They spent a few hours there before returning home together to Castellanza. It was a typical quiet evening for them. However, once they arrived home, her husband had other plans. He planned to visit his elderly mother in the nearby town, as she was unwell and needed help with housework. He was absent all evening and night, returning home the next morning around 10:30 a.m. He expected to find his wife at home since she usually left for work later. Typically, at that time, she would be enjoying her morning routine, having breakfast, getting ready, and occasionally doing some cleaning. To his surprise, Marilena was missing. Initially, her husband thought she might have gone to work earlier than usual, possibly due to a last-minute request. However, Marilena always communicated any changes to her schedule and would not just disappear without notice. Moreover, that morning, she had planned to spend time with him to discuss their future plans and some important matters. He started to feel anxious and tried to reach Marilena. After several unsuccessful attempts to call her mobile phone, he noticed it was turned off, which was unusual for her as she was always reachable during work hours. When he checked the house, he discovered more worrying signs. Her bag containing personal items and documents was missing, but her car was parked in the yard. This was strange since she never left without her car. Concerned, he went outside to look around the neighborhood. He talked to several neighbors who were awake and working in their gardens, but none of them had seen or heard anything unusual. He also called his daughters, but they had not heard from their mother either. Marilena's phone still remained off. Feeling restless, he decided to contact the police. However, they informed him that they could not file a missing person report until 24 hours had passed. It was not until July 31st, when he returned to the police station, that his report was finally accepted and the search began. During this time, he couldn't get in touch with Marilena. He reached out to everyone who knew her, including her daughters, relatives, and colleagues, but no one had seen her. By the time the police acknowledged the report of her disappearance, the management and staff at the supermarkets were already worried because she hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. Marilena was known for her punctuality and reliability. She never missed a shift, so her absence raised great concern. The police interviewed all of Marilena's co-workers. They were shocked by her disappearance and found no indications that anything was wrong. No one was aware of any issues she might have been dealing with, nor did it seem like she had plans for a long trip or any reason to leave unexpectedly. The last person to see and talk to Marilena was her husband, making him the first person law enforcement wanted to question. Detectives interviewed him multiple times to understand what happened before her disappearance. They aimed to find out if the couple had any issues that might have led Marilena to leave or if anyone harbored ill will toward her. Her husband found these suggestions ridiculous and dismissed them, stating that their family had never been involved in crime or shady activities, and they did not have any enemies. Detectives interviewed Marilena's friends and found that they had no useful information. Her husband mentioned one concerning detail: the family was facing financial troubles, owing €10,000 to the bank. However, this lead seemed unhelpful since they were consistently making payments on the loan. He also provided documentation proving that both he and Marilena were fulfilling their financial obligations without issues. The police explored various possibilities, ranging from a voluntary disappearance to a potential crime, but after several days, they had no concrete answers. Meanwhile, Marilena had not used her phone or bank cards, raising concerns about her well-being, as it's difficult for anyone to survive long without money, a phone, or a car. A press conference was held to gather more information about Marilena's disappearance, and a television appeal was broadcasted to raise awareness. The prosecutor's office requested a detailed description of the missing woman, which was shared on all channels along with a call for eyewitnesses to come forward. Unfortunately, this effort did not lead to any new information. To assist with the search, specially trained dogs were brought in. The dogs were taken around the house and the area by the gate, but they remained calm and did not indicate any scent. The courtyard and Marilena's car were also searched without any success. Additionally, Marilena's relatives appeared on television, made several public statements, and directly reached out to her in hopes of getting a response. Days went by, but Marilena was still missing. The critical timeframe for finding her alive had passed, and anxiety deepened as troubling thoughts arose. Her husband and daughters felt increasingly worried. Law enforcement still issued a nationwide appeal through various media to widen the search efforts. Meanwhile, relatives created and distributed flyers featuring Marilena's photo throughout the city. A week later, the police had almost lost hope of finding her alive and shifted their focus to the surrounding area, trying to identify anyone who might have been involved in her possible murder or kidnapping. Naturally, close relatives, especially her husband, became suspects. He was the last known person to have spent time with her. He claimed he was at his mother's house during the time she went missing, which raised suspicions. After appearing on television, he acted cautiously, seemingly avoiding drawing attention to himself. He explained this behavior by saying he wanted to evade media scrutiny, but law enforcement grew suspicious that there might be a more concerning reason behind his actions. Consequently, they began to investigate him more thoroughly. Detectives confirmed that the evening after her husband brought her home, he went to help his sick mother with housework. Neighbors saw them arrive together, and several witnesses confirmed that he left almost immediately afterward. He was not seen again until the next morning. Neighbors near his mother's house also supported his story, stating he arrived late in the evening, and the timing matched perfectly. CCTV cameras along the road recorded his car traveling to and from his mother's house at the times he mentioned. His alibi appeared solid and did not raise any suspicions. However, investigators were not quick to remove him from the list of suspects, as close acquaintances are often implicated in such cases. Therefore, they returned to that neighborhood hoping to gather more information from former neighbors. Local residents were interviewed, and detectives meticulously investigated Marilena's previous social circle to find any suspicious individuals who might have had an interest in the kidnapping or potential violent actions. At this stage, her husband appeared to be an unlikely suspect for several reasons. He and his wife were widely regarded as loving partners with minimal disagreements. He had no financial incentive to cause her harm, and he had a solid alibi. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to progress as new leads surfaced. After speaking with the couple's acquaintances at their former residence, the Carabinieri shifted their focus to Vito Clerico, a 64-year-old man who was well acquainted with Marilena and her husband, lived nearby. From the outset, Vito displayed a cautious demeanor and seemed anxious. During questioning, he changed his story multiple times, which raised significant suspicions. The investigation team focused on Marilena's neighbor to gather more information. Background checks revealed that he had no criminal record, and his relationship with Marilena did not initially cause any concerns. A mutual friend mentioned that they met at work when Marilena was a promoter at shopping centers. This was Vito working as a storekeeper at Marilena's workplace. Their jobs frequently brought them together, leading to regular communication. The friend described Vito as irresponsible, noting that he had a history of borrowing large amounts of money from others and either not repaying it or repaying it late. There were also rumors that Marilena had lent him money during their time together, which could suggest a possible motive for the crime. As a result, he was called in for questioning. During the interview at the station, Vito described receiving a call from Marilena on the night she disappeared. She asked to meet him at the station in Garbagnac Milanese, explaining that her husband was visiting his sick mother and could not assist her. She mentioned having important business in the city. Vito, being friends with her, agreed to meet, but Marilena never showed up. Initially, he thought she changed her mind and went home. However, several aspects of his story seemed suspicious. First, the timing was too late for any business dealings. Second, the timeline Vito provided did not align with the information the police had confirmed. According to the timeline, Marilena should have been preparing to go to the station while she was with her friends, but no one confirmed that she had any plans to go anywhere or contacted anyone. Additionally, since her husband was nearby, she could have asked him for help. All of this seemed illogical. Due to these inconsistencies, detectives decided to investigate Vito's account further. They discovered that his mobile phone was never registered on the route he claimed to have taken. Furthermore, he was not seen on any surveillance cameras, including those at the station. If Vito was telling the truth, he should have appeared on video. The most intriguing discovery was that the detectives found a woman in the recordings who looked like Marilena. This indicated that she had indeed visited Garbagnac Milanese, from which she never returned. Upon examining Vito's mobile phone, the detectives confirmed that he had received several calls in the days leading up to her disappearance. Marilena had repeatedly tried to contact him, but he had consistently ignored her. However, on the night she disappeared, there was no call from her to him. Instead, there was a single outgoing call from Vito to her number on the evening of July 30th, 2017. This evidence directly contradicted his account of events. During the conversation, one of the detectives spotted dark red stains on Vito's trousers that looked like blood. Vito quickly claimed that he raised rabbits and that the stains might have come from butchering one of them, as he owned around 40 rabbits. However, the police doubted his story, confiscated the trousers, and sent them to a lab for testing. The analysis confirmed that the stains were human blood, specifically matching that of Marilena. Vito was unable to explain this finding. On September 11, 2017, he was arrested, 40 days after Marilena had disappeared. He was charged with murder and concealing her body. During interrogations, Vito provided confusing and inconsistent accounts that varied from day to day, filled with odd details, but he did not provide any clear confessions or truth. Eventually, he was worn down and agreed to tell investigators where Marilena's body, while still denying that he was the murderer. He claimed he helped the real killer hide her body out of fear for himself and his wife. Vito was compelled to assist in disposing of a body, and he kept the identity of Marilena's killer a secret. On September 12, authorities began excavating his backyard, specifically in a small garden in Garbagnac Milanese. At the exact spot Vito indicated, they found a shallow grave approximately 40 centimeters deep. Inside, they discovered a decapitated body wrapped in multiple layers of polyethylene and placed in a bag, which was partially covered in concrete. The advanced decomposition of the remains and the missing head complicated the identification process. Although the clothing resembled Marilena's, there were no identifying features, like tattoos, scars, or fractures, to confirm her identity. As a result, identification needed to be made using dental records. In the meantime, police continued to search for the missing head. Vito, for unknown reasons, refused to cooperate with law enforcement. His behavior was quite unusual, leading them to suspect he might be feigning mental disorders to claim insanity during the trial and evade punishment for the murder. It was revealed that he had been diagnosed with minor mental health issues in the past and had taken medication, but he had recently stopped. Eventually, under pressure from detectives, Vito started talking again. He claimed that he not only helped hide Marilena's body but also beheaded her after the murder. He said a certain killer had ordered him to do this. The decapitation was a deliberate act to make identification more difficult. Vito stated that he had thrown the head in a dumpster. Given how much time had passed, it was likely that the head had already been taken to a dump outside the city, making it nearly impossible to find. However, the authorities were skeptical. Every claim he made needed to be verified. While interrogating Vito, the police also spoke with his family members. One of them mentioned that Vito owned several plots of land. He recalled seeing Vito heading toward one of the most remote plots the day after Marilena's disappearance. This plot was an abandoned field located between Garbonnier Milanese and the town where Marilena lived. The suspect owned property there but typically did not visit without a valid reason. The family members speculated that Vito might have gone to this isolated area to dispose of Marilena's head. Before beginning their search for the head, the police rechecked Vito's mobile phone. This allowed them to confirm that he had indeed traveled to that location, helping to narrow down the search area. A large search team was organized, which included specially trained dogs. The task was made more difficult by the thick growth of blackberries in most of the area. The team thoroughly searched the abandoned field. A few hundred meters from the road, they found a bag hidden in the bushes. It was the same bag that Marilena usually took with her for errands and shopping. Inside the bag was Marilena's head. On September 26th, the body was finally confirmed to be that of Marilena Ree, a 58-year-old woman who had been missing. However, one question still lingered: what was the motive behind her murder? It is believed that it was likely connected to financial issues. Investigators discovered that in 2014, Marilena had loaned Vito and his wife a significant amount of money, approximately 80,000 euros, from her savings. Vito had persuaded a mutual acquaintance that he and his wife were struggling with the bank due to overdue loans and were at risk of losing their home. Trusting his word, Marilena lent him the money, believing he was honest. In the following years, Vito repeatedly delayed paying back the debt, relying on Marilena's patience and her lack of urgent financial needs. However, Marilena eventually needed the money and requested a quick repayment. When Vito failed to return the funds, she had to take out a bank loan, planning to pay it off as soon as she received her repayment from Vito. Despite her growing insistence on getting her money back, Vito still did not repay the debt. On that significant evening, after her husband went to visit his mother, Marilena likely chose to confront Vito about the money. It is unclear how she ended up in the nearby city. During their discussion, Vito refused to return the money, which prompted a violent reaction from Marilena. This led to a conflict that escalated into a fight. A forensic expert noted that before Marilena was beheaded, she was hit on the head with a blunt object at least 6 times. The specifics are hard to determine due to multiple fractures in her skull and facial bones. Additionally, the remains had deteriorated significantly, complicating the examination further. After the murder, Vito cut off his victim's head, buried the body in a shallow grave near his house, wrapped it in several layers of plastic, and partially covered it with concrete. He had only a small amount of building materials, which was insufficient to fully hide the burial site. He placed the head inside her bag, took it out of town, and threw it deep into the thorny bushes on his remote property, hoping it would never be discovered. Even though the reconstruction of the events was supported by various pieces of evidence, Vito did not confess to the crime. Searches of his house and car found traces of blood and indirect evidence suggesting that he was not alone in committing the crime. Unfortunately, not all details could be uncovered. Vito completely denied any involvement of his wife or anyone else, claiming that a third party was responsible but refusing to identify them. After several interrogations, he ultimately took the blame for the crime. Vito's defense attorney claimed that his confession was coerced, noting that he had been questioned at least 10 times and believed his rights were violated. Initially, he only admitted to hiding the remains but did not confess to murder. However, he later claimed to have killed Marilena. Eventually, his story changed again, and he denied everything. The lawyer suggested that someone else must have committed the crime, indicating the possible involvement of a third party. However, this theory could not be supported by witnesses or the evidence gathered. Without any solid leads on the identity of this mysterious person, the idea was dismissed. All of Vito's inconsistent statements, which raised suspicions among investigators, were attributed to an effort to protect his wife. The next step focused on Vito's mental state. Psychiatric evaluations were performed, which found no significant issues. The prosecution claimed that the concealed body, beheading, and the discarded bag far from the city pointed to premeditated murder, a well-planned crime. It was clear that the defendant had intentionally lured the victim into a trap. However, despite the strong arguments and evidence, Vito cleverly kept altering his story, apparently aiming to confuse the investigation. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, Vito tried to argue that the prosecution was biased against him. His lawyer suggested this was to make him a scapegoat and resolve the case quickly. The accused also mentioned having amnesia, which he said prevented him from remembering the days surrounding Marilena's murder. He ultimately confessed to hearing voices of demons that had tormented him for years, leading him to kill Marilena. However, these claims were disproven through investigations, and multiple witnesses stated they had never seen him exhibit signs of mental illness. Throughout the investigation, Vito remained calm and did not show signs of significant stress, which is uncommon for someone with mental health issues. The only medical condition identified in him was epilepsy, but he experienced seizures very rarely. Even if they happen more frequently, aggressive behavior is not typical for those with epilepsy. Detectives were intrigued by Vito's desperate attempts to shift the focus away from his wife. From the start, she appeared to be a potential accomplice in the murder. Investigators viewed her as more dominant and assertive than Vito, leading them to suspect she might have been the mastermind behind the crime. As they dug deeper, they uncovered more compelling information. Marilena was not the only woman deceived by Vito. He frequently borrowed large amounts of money from relatives, friends, and colleagues, ranging from 30,000 to 100,000 euros, to finance the construction of his house. This project became an obsession for both Vito and his wife, who had long dreamed of building a grand villa. To achieve their goal, they took on significant debts and loans, often borrowing again just to make payments and delay the associated issues of non-payment. By the time Marilena was murdered, they were under immense pressure from creditors. It is likely that everyone who lent them money was in danger, just as Marilena was. Due to the extensive examinations needed for a thorough investigation of the deceased's body, the burial did not take place until 10 months after the body was found. The funeral was held on June 1, 2018. By the end of January 2019, the trial of Vito began. From the start, his inconsistent statements, confessions, and retractions created a sense of distrust. The defense attorney struggled to effectively counter the prosecution's arguments, achieving only limited success in reducing the charges. Initially, it was thought that the murder involved torture, but a forensic expert later confirmed that the severed head and some of the body mutilations occurred after death. On January 24, 2019, Vito, who is 66 years old, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He appealed the verdict, but his appeal was rejected. Investigations into his wife's possible involvement in Marilena's death are still ongoing. On November 21, 2017, Vito was attacked in prison by his cellmate. His cellmate used a metal plate and a makeshift weapon during the assault. Vito reported that he had tried to stop all communication with his cellmate, who had made clear abuse advances that escalated into harassment. When Vito threatened to report his cellmate's behavior, he was attacked. While in prison, Vito continually expressed his dissatisfaction with the justice system, insisting on his innocence and asking for safety from his hostile cellmate. Despite his requests, he was sent back to prison after receiving treatment. On Sunday, November 29, 2020, he was found dead in the prison toilet. In his hand was a note that powerfully criticized the Italian law enforcement. He died after swallowing a garbage bag, which obstructed his airway and led to suffocation. Many suspect that he did not take his own life and that the incident was planned by his cellmate. Kapunda, South Australia, was a quiet town where residents felt secure. Inside the Rowe family home, it appeared calm, the lights were off, the house was silent, and the family was asleep. However, just after midnight, a violent struggle ensued. An intruder had entered the house, and in moments, the Rowe family's home became a scene of terror. The next morning, everything appeared normal from the outside. The house seemed unchanged, and nobody was aware of the events that had transpired just a few hours earlier. It would take several days for neighbors to become concerned and to recognize that something was seriously wrong. What happened that night? In 2010, the small town of Kapunda in South Australia was a place where everyone knew each other, life was calm and relaxed. One notable family in the community was the Rowes, who lived a simple but fulfilling life. The father, Andrew Rowe, had moved from England to Australia with his family when he was 3 years old. They settled in Adelaide. As a child growing up in the suburbs, Andrew was friendly and had a passion for fishing trips with his dad. His laid-back personality made him approachable and likable to those around him. As a young man, Andrew met Rose, a lively and cheerful woman who was just a year younger than him. They connected immediately and soon became inseparable. In 1985, they married in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Their happiness grew with the birth of their son, Christopher, in 1987, and later their daughter, Chantel, in 1994. They then started a carpet cleaning business that quickly thrived, giving them financial security. By 2010, Christopher had moved out and was living with his girlfriend nearby, while 16-year-old Chantel was managing both school and a part-time job at a local cafe. That year, Chantel encountered an unexpected challenge. She found out she was pregnant. Despite the obstacles ahead, she was determined to create a future for her child, with her boyfriend, Dylan, providing steadfast support. Life in the Rowe household continued normally until the night of November 8, 2010. Events that unfolded that night would deeply shock the town and lead investigators to search for answers in one of the most brutal crimes the region had ever experienced. After midnight, an intruder broke into the Rowe home and committed a violent massacre. The crime scene was horrifying, with blood covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. Surprisingly, it took 2 days for anyone to notice that something was wrong. Concerned neighbors, disturbed by the unusual silence and lack of activity from the Rowe home, decided to investigate. Looking through the windows, they were met with a shocking sight. Andrew and Rose were found dead in the kitchen, their bodies severely mutilated. Chantel was discovered in her bedroom, and the brutality of her murder was even more unsettling. Each family member had suffered numerous stab wounds, becoming victims of a brutal and merciless attack. The autopsy provided horrifying details. Andrew had been stabbed 29 times, Rose over 50 times, and Chantel 33 times. Disturbingly, Chantel had also been assaulted prior to her murder, making the tragedy even more incomprehensible. While vacationing in Queensland with his fiancée, Christopher first learned about a crime in his hometown through social media. Investigators first focused on Christopher, the lone survivor of the Rowe family, but soon cleared him as a suspect. The investigation took a chilling turn when authorities uncovered disturbing details. After the murders, the killer did not flee in a hurry, rather, they took their time. Evidence indicated that the perpetrator changed into clean clothes and even rested on Chantel's bed. Drag marks revealed that she tried to hide but was pulled from her hiding spot. Robbery was ruled out as a motive since nothing was stolen. Valuables like electronics and cash were untouched. The brutality of the crime suggested either a personal vendetta or the actions of someone with a disturbingly cruel nature. Furthermore, parts of the crime scene seemed to have been wiped clean, suggesting an unsuccessful attempt to eliminate evidence. Bloody footprints led to the front door of the Rowe home but suddenly stopped outside, indicating that the killer deliberately removed their shoes and exited in socks to avoid leaving more evidence. The most shocking discovery was the absence of forced entry. This indicated that the murderer was likely someone the family knew and trusted or had found a discreet way to enter. As investigators looked into the gruesome crime scene, they found that Rose had suffered the most. She had been stabbed over 50 times, much more than the others. She initially survived the attack and managed to make a phone call for help before the killer realized she was still alive. Unfortunately, before she could escape, the murderer came back and continued stabbing her until she was silenced for good. As investigators faced this harsh reality, they began to identify possible suspects. Andrew and Rose had no enemies, financial issues, or ongoing disputes that could explain such a violent crime. This left them considering one probable motive: Chantel. At only 16, Chantel was juggling school, a part-time job, and preparing for her baby's unexpected arrival. Her boyfriend, Dylan, had been supportive throughout her challenges. They had been together for a year, shared the same school, and made plans for their future. Although Dylan, also 16, seemed like an unlikely suspect, the police needed to be thorough in their investigation. They questioned him, verified his alibi, and searched for any reason someone might want to harm Chantel or her family. Dylan cooperated fully from the beginning. Heartbroken, he candidly expressed his love for Chantal, their hopes of raising their child together, and how the news of her murder had devastated him. He had a strong alibi, as he was celebrating his grandfather's anniversary in another city, with numerous witnesses to confirm his presence. With Dylan eliminated as a suspect, the investigation faced another frustrating standstill. However, the police had a significant asset: the killer's DNA. Forensic teams had gathered samples, including seminal fluid, which could lead directly to the murderer. Yet, when they checked it against the national database, they found no match, indicating that the perpetrator had no previous criminal history. Another important detail came to light: the murder weapon was one of the knives from the Rose Kitchen. This indicated that the attack might not have been planned in advance, but rather a spontaneous act of violence. Additionally, the killer had taken the knives with him, removing a key piece of evidence. The estimated time of death was between midnight and 2 a.m. A neighbor later revealed they heard Rose scream for help around 1 a.m., followed by a loud thud, but assumed it was just a heated argument and did not call the police. With few clues and no obvious suspects, investigators reached out to the public for help, hoping to make progress. They received numerous tips, but most were misleading, consisting of wild theories, hoaxes, or leads that went nowhere. Just when it seemed like the investigation had stalled, Dylan remembered something important. The night before Chantal's murder, she had been unwell. She had a fever and had called her boss to inform them that she wouldn't be coming to work the next day. At precisely 5 a.m., Dylan texted her to check on how she was feeling. His message was read, but there was no response. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Chantal had already been dead for several hours, and it was someone else in the house who had read his message. The most frightening discovery followed. The killer had attempted to reply to Dylan's message, but since Chantal's phone had no credit, the message did not go through. This was a failed effort to make it look like she was still alive. With this unsettling clue, detectives began to investigate Chantal's social circle, looking for anyone who might hold a grudge. They soon encountered Jason Alexander Downey. Jason was part of the same school group as Dylan but hardly knew Chantal. He appeared innocent, of average height, thin, and quiet. Detectives started with the intention of asking Jason a few standard questions and moving on. However, as the interview progressed, his behavior became concerning. Instead of responding straightforwardly, he appeared nervous and avoided direct answers. Unexpectedly, he also claimed to have an alibi for the night of the murders, even though no one had inquired about it. The contradictions in his statements were quite troubling. Investigators collected fingerprints and DNA samples from Jason for comparison. He complied readily, showing an unusual calmness that momentarily led them to question their suspicions. However, they soon noticed several recent cuts on his palms. When asked about them, Jason attributed the injuries to an accident at a machine shop, but the wounds appeared too clean and precise, resembling injuries from gripping a knife. Forensic experts quickly found the answer. Jason's fingerprints matched those found on Chantal's bedroom door exactly. The belief that the murderer needed to be big and strong was incorrect. Jason, who was thin and seemed harmless, had overpowered 3 individuals in a sudden outburst of rage. Even more alarmingly, he deceived almost everyone around him. He even went to Chantal's memorial, laid down flowers, and pretended to mourn with her family and friends. Originally from Scotland, Jason had relocated to Kapunda with his mother and older brother. While his life appeared normal on the outside, there was a much darker side hidden beneath the surface. Chantal and Jason were never really close. She was polite to him, didn't dislike him, but she also didn't have any strong feelings for him. To her, he was just another member of the group. In contrast, Jason's feelings toward her were more intense. He had previously tried to show interest in Chantal, but she had rejected him. When he learned that Chantal was pregnant with Dylan's child, it triggered his jealousy. Jason's obsession had become overwhelming, and on the night of November 8th, his emotions hit a peak. When police first questioned Jason after his arrest, his unnerving calmness surprised the detectives. He denied any involvement, speaking with a disturbing confidence as if he could dismiss the growing evidence against him. He claimed that his fingerprints at the row home were from a visit several weeks prior, but that was not the only untruth. Forensic analysis showed that Jason's DNA was found on Chantel's body. When confronted with this evidence, he told an implausible story, insisting that he and Chantel had been intimate during his last visit. However, the science was clear: DNA cannot stay viable on a body for weeks. It had to be recent. During the interrogation, Jason eventually broke down and shared a troubling account of the events from that night. Earlier, he had a fierce argument with his mother and stepfather, which left him feeling frustrated and angry. As a result, he decided to sleep in his car. However, after learning from Dylan that Chantel was homesick and vulnerable, his feelings for her took a disturbing turn. What began as a simple plan to drive past her house turned into something much more alarming. He parked his car at the end of the street, out of sight, and approached her home. The house was dark and quiet, except for one bathroom window that was ajar. Being thin and agile, Jason managed to slip through the small opening easily. Once inside, he waited in the bathroom for nearly half an hour, listening to ensure that the house was completely silent. He later claimed his only purpose was to confess his feelings to Chantel, but this raises questions. If that were true, why did he bring a kitchen knife with him before entering her bedroom? The investigators quickly recognized that Jason was not being honest. He hadn't come to share his feelings, he wanted to manipulate Chantel. As soon as he entered her room, she sensed something was wrong. When she pushed back against him, it triggered his anger. In a blind rage, Jason grabbed a knife and attacked her, stabbing her multiple times. The noise alerted her parents, who rushed to help, but Jason, now completely engulfed in violence, turned the knife on them as well, brutally killing both. Later, Jason attempted to argue that his actions were a crime of passion, but the evidence pointed to something much more sinister: premeditation. As the police investigated further, they uncovered more incriminating evidence. They found a pair of bloodstained shoes left in a remote location. The DNA on them matched all three victims. The shoe prints also matched the bloody footprints at the crime scene. Additionally, Jason's sweat was discovered inside the shoes, adding to the evidence against him. Although he occasionally cooperated, offering to lead detectives to where he supposedly discarded the murder weapons, those weapons were never found. The police believed he was trying to manipulate the investigation and buy time, even as more evidence piled up against him. By the fall of 2011, almost a year after the murders, Jason Alexander Downey was on trial. Throughout the trial, he remained strangely emotionless, frequently changing his statements but never expressing genuine remorse. He claimed to have no memory of killing the Rowe family, even though there was strong forensic evidence proving his guilt. A particularly disturbing detail came to light during the trial. After the murders, Jason took Chantel's pendant and chain as a twisted trophy, serving as a grim reminder of the girl who had rejected him. Jason's intense feelings of rejection drove him to commit horrific acts. When he eventually pleaded guilty, it wasn't because he felt sorry, rather, it was a strategic choice to receive a lighter sentence. One investigator remarked, his guilty plea should not be interpreted as remorse. These murders were brutal, premeditated, and shocking beyond comprehension. On April 17, 2012, Jason Alexander Downey was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have had to serve at least 45 years before being eligible for parole. In a last attempt to manipulate the situation, Jason wrote a letter to Chantel's family and friends. In the letter, he expressed regret and claimed he deserved his punishment. However, the sincerity of his apology felt superficial and insincere, similar to a child being forced to say sorry instead of a man who genuinely regrets his actions. For Christopher Rowe, who lost his entire family in a single night, no sentence could ever replace what he has lost. To honor his loved ones, he decided to tattoo their names on his body, a lasting tribute to his parents and sister, who he will never see again. After the tragic event, Christopher stepped away from work to heal from painful memories. When he came back, he struggled to adjust to his previous life. Eventually, he took over his father's business. Geraldine Kriegel and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. They had a wonderful relationship. Even though they faced infertility, they did not lose hope. Both had successful careers, financial stability, and they wanted to adopt. They were waiting for confirmation of their documents. Finally, Geraldine and Patrick received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia is available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia. She was born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk, Russia. Immediately after birth, she was taken to an orphanage because her biological mother was unable to provide for her. Anastasia spent her entire childhood mostly alone, as the caregivers primarily focused on more demanding children. This lack of attention resulted in her having difficulty expressing emotions. Geraldine and Patrick was overjoyed when they learned about Anastasia. They quickly developed a close relationship with her. On August 10, 2006, they brought her home, and this date became a family holiday. From now on, her name is Anastasia Anna Kriegel, affectionately called Anna. The day when laughter filled their home was the day that Geraldine and Patrick truly became parents. They wanted Anna to remember her culture, so they bought her a matryoshka doll. The once quiet life of Geraldine and Patrick turned into a fun adventure. Anna was daddy's angel and mommy's princess. They tried to diversify their lives as much as possible. They went ice skating and planned excursions every summer. They vacationed in Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they had a house, and Anna made several friends. She always looked forward to this trip, enjoyed France, and even studied French. However, there were obstacles in Anna's life. She struggled with learning English, and her mother helped her because she wanted Anna to be able to communicate with her peers. Anna also faced challenges in forming close relationships and expressing her emotions. Time spent without adequate care in the orphanage led her to be uncomfortable with physical affection. Nonetheless, Geraldine and Patrick were able to help Anna overcome this emotional emptiness through their unconditional love, support. A nurturing environment, combined with educational activities, healthy eating, and sports, laid a solid foundation for Anna's future. Unfortunately, the girl also faced health concerns. During a routine examination, the doctor discovered a tumor in her right ear, which caused hearing loss, as well as partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these difficulties, Anna grew into an energetic and joyful girl. However, her hearing and vision problems made studying difficult, leading to poor academic performance in elementary school. She attended consultations with specialists until the 3rd grade in order to keep up with her peers. In her everyday life, Anna took her challenges to heart. This affected her self-esteem and diminished her desire to live in this world. One day, while walking home and enjoying the fresh air with music playing through her favorite headphones, she encountered 4 boys who blocked her path. They made fun of her, one even pinched her. Anna ran home in tears and told her mother. Geraldine and Patrick took this incident seriously and filed a complaint against the boys, informing the police about the boy who had touched Anna. However, he was let off with just a warning. Consequently, the parents decided to accompany Anna to school and pick her up every day themselves, but this led to more ridicule. She vented her feelings on social media, seeking acceptance from her peers. This situation deeply affected Geraldine. It was painful for her to see how unhappy her daughter was. Soon, Anna began to inflict physical harm on herself to drown out the emotional pain. The parents realized the severity of the situation and worried that their child might take more drastic actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to be happy. Finally, Anna began to show signs of improvement thanks to personal therapy. She made some friends with whom she had sleepovers, went for walks, watched movies, discussed boys. As Anna's high school education was coming to an end, on a sunny day, May 13, 2018, Geraldine wanted to help her daughter prepare for a test. On weekends, they usually did their homework together. Their hard work, that day they decided to take a break. They turned on the TV, made popcorn, and watched a movie while hugging Anna's cousins. Geraldine joined them and ordered pizza. The children played games while the adults sipped wine and enjoyed snacks, filling the house with a joyful atmosphere. May 14, 2018, began as usual. Geraldine got on the train headed to Dublin while Anna went to school. After lunch, she had an appointment with a psychologist. Patrick, who had retired by this time, took the opportunity to sleep a little longer. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna called her mother, but there was no answer because Geraldine was at an important meeting. She wrote a message to her daughter, saying that she would call back soon. When Anna came home, Patrick was relaxing in the garden and heard the doorbell. A young man was standing at the threshold. He was the same age as Anna. Patrick was not expecting guests, and Anna was surprised to see the guy. Patrick had never seen him before. Anna's joy was obvious. She whispered something to the guy, grabbed her favorite sweater, and told her father that she would be back soon. Patrick reminded her that she needed to study, which she had forgotten because of the sudden guest. He saw them leave for the park. Patrick was not immediately worried since the park was only a 20-minute walk from their home. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and tried to call Anna, but she did not answer. Not wanting to overreact, she thought Anna would be home soon. However, Anna did not return. Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with some guy. This was strange considering Anna's difficulties with communication. Geraldine immediately texted Anna, asking her to come home. When there was still no answer, it alarmed the parents, especially considering Anna's previous issues with bullying and her health problems. Concerned, Geraldine decided to go to the park, but there were no traces of Anna there. Geraldine and Patrick began searching the streets in their car, trying to find any signs of Anna. Their fear deepened when they realized they knew nothing about the young man Anna had been with. By their own efforts proved unsuccessful, by 9 p.m., they reported Anna's disappearance to the police, emphasizing that her lack of response to calls and messages was out of character for her. They also informing the police about the unknown guy. The police quickly tracked down the young man, whose name was Boy B. His family was surprised by the police's arrival. Investigators asked Boy B to describe Anna's whereabouts, and he said that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. before he went home. After that, the police began searching for Anna. They combed the area and reviewed footage from surveillance cameras. Patrick and Geraldine provided photographs of Anna, including one in which she was wearing the black sweatshirt she had worn in that evening. Supporters gathered around Geraldine and Patrick, while the police carefully studied video recordings showing Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m. At 5:14 p.m., they left the park through a different exit, but after that, Anna seemed to have vanished without a trace. Her disappearance became a mystery. Progress in the investigation was made when they managed to find a witness who saw Anna and Boy B walking through the park. Video footage captured Boy B walking alone through the park at 5:49 p.m. Under pressure from the police, Boy B admitted that he was with another friend named Boy A. Boy A liked Anna, and Boy B was acting as an intermediary between them. With this new information, investigators intensified their efforts and began broadcasting information about the search for Anna across all social networks, as well as in local newspapers. Simultaneously, they searched for Boy A. His backpack was found. Video footage showed him entering and exiting the park, but he had been absent for a long time. Some opinions suggested that Anna might have run away, but this theory was quickly dismissed. To resolve the mystery of Anna's disappearance, detectives organized a step-by-step recreation of the events that had occurred in the park that day alongside Boy B and Boy A, under their parents' supervision. The interaction between the boys raised the police's suspicions, so they were separated for individual interrogations. Boy B's testimony remained consistent. Boy B began the interview the previous day by repeating what he had told police the previous week, that Boy A had asked him to call Anna's house, in Leixlip, just outside Dublin in County Kildare, and bring her to meet him at St. Catherine's Park, so they could talk. And that he had left Anna with Boy A before going home to do his homework. During the investigation, police reviewed more than 700 hours of CCTV footage from the area around where Anna went missing. The detectives, Daly and Gannon, repeatedly told Boy B that the route he claimed they had taken that day did not match what was recorded by cameras in and around St. Catherine's Park, which is on the Lucan side of Leixlip, on the border between County Kildare and County Dublin. But Boy B stuck to his story, offering various explanations to police about the inconsistencies between the CCTV footage and his account. They said that, on a later occasion, they were attacked by two strange men, resulting in a fight where Boy A hit one of the men on the head. Both men ran away. He then showed the police the injuries they had inflicted, including scratches on his arms and legs and a cut on his face. These men could have been responsible for Anna's disappearance, so the detectives needed their descriptions. The police also seized the boy's belongings to conduct examinations for DNA evidence of the attackers. As the investigation progressed, police brought in specialized search units, including divers and a rescue team, to check nearby bodies of water. In total, 60 people were involved in the search for Anna, including volunteers and the Kriegel family. Anna's disappearance became a sensational news story. Her photo in a black sweatshirt became a symbol of her search. Near the park, there is Glenwood House, a derelict farmhouse designed by James Gondon in the 19th century, located in a town of Coldblow, west of Lucan. One of the eyewitnesses reported seeing young people and police entering it, so the police went there to investigate. The house was 2 stories, sat on 42 acres of land. It was in ruins, with the roofs and walls having collapsed. It is unclear why the police had not checked there earlier. They conducted a thorough examination of both the house itself and the fields behind it. The search began in the park, where they meticulously searched every bush before gradually moving toward the abandoned house. The police checked the utility room while the volunteers searched the main building. It was very dark inside as there was no light in the room. The policeman was taken aback by the pungent smell filling the room. Once his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized that in front of him lay a naked female body, next to which lay clothes and a broken telephone. On the floor, there were traces of blood beside a brick and a large branch. Judging by the clothing, it was the body of Anna. There were multiple wounds on her body, and her neck was wrapped in duct tape. Her hand lay as if she had been trying to tear off the duct tape herself. It was evident that she had fought valiantly for her life. Her naked body, wearing only socks, lay among broken bottles and garbage. Many questions arose about how this could have happened, who was responsible for this crime. Why was Anna in this building? This incident irrevocably changed the lives of Geraldine and Patrick. The death of their long-awaited and beloved daughter was an indescribable tragedy for them. The whole city learned the details of what happened, and most people were in shock. Glenwood House, located near the park where children had played peacefully, was now the scene of a terrible crime. An autopsy revealed that Anna had sustained about a dozen wounds all over her body, including bruises and cuts, primarily on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was attributed to blunt force trauma to the head, as well as asphyxiation, indicating that Anna had been abused. Based on the traces of semen found, it remains unclear whether she was conscious during the assault. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., just a few minutes after she left the park. At the entrance to the building, she was struck with a heavy stick that had nails sticking out of it before being hit with a brick. Blood on the walls and evidence suggested that the attacker dragged her body to the window, most likely to limit visibility for anyone outside. After collecting all the evidence, the police arrested 2 individuals. Boy B and Boy A, who were last seen with Anna, were suspected of the murder. In Boy A's backpack, a mask with the image of a zombie was found with traces of Anna's blood, along with gloves, shin guards, and knee pads. The semen found matched Boy A's DNA. Anna's blood was also located on his shoes and clothes. His mother believed he had been attacked and then washed his clothing. Boy A denied involvement in Anna's death despite the evidence found at the crime scene. No DNA was detected from Boy B, and there was no blood found on his belongings. During interrogation, Boy B admitted that he had seen Anna enter the abandoned house with Boy A but was unaware of his friend's intentions. Boy B wanted to approach the house but was frightened by screams at the entrance. He witnessed Boy A tearing off Anna's clothes and then turned to Boy B, his face reflecting the danger that prompted Boy B to remain silent. It later emerged that Boy A had shared his vile plans with Boy B. Both boys were released on bail pending a trial date, which angered local residents not only because they feared for their safety but also because the identities of the criminals had not been made public. Both boys came from respectable and successful families and had no criminal histories or psychological problems, which surprised the residents of the city. The hearing of their case took place on April 29, 2019. It was a closed hearing, attended by the parents of the defendants, as well as Geraldine and Patrick, who found the proceedings difficult but promised to defend their daughter to the end. The prosecutor stated that Boy B had lured Anna out of the house under the pretense of facilitating a meeting with Boy A, whom she liked, while Boy A took her to the abandoned house and abused her. The jury trial took place on June 18. Boy A was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Boy B was also found guilty in Anna's death, receiving a 15-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 8 years, despite the lack of material evidence. According to the law, their identities must remain confidential. If released, they would be given new identification. However, the harshest sentence was borne by Anna's parents, as Geraldine stated that life without Anna had ceased to hold meaning. Patrick died on June 19, 2022, haunted by the guilt of allowing his daughter to go with a stranger that day. The tragic loss of Anna Kriegel left an indelible mark on her family and the community of Leixlip. Geraldine and Patrick, who had poured their love, hope into building a joyful life for their adopted daughter, were shattered by her brutal murder. The conviction of Boy A and Boy B, though a step toward justice, could not fill the void left by Anna's absence. Anna's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her.